Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Silas Thornburg, and I've been a forest ranger for 6 years now. Before this job, I worked at the Ford plant down in Louisville for 12 years until they shut it down. Lost my house, my wife left me, and I figured the mountains might give me some peace. Turns out the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky needed someone who knew how to fix things with his hands. Perfect match. I'm not one of those college boys with their fancy degrees in nature books. I fix broken trail signs, repair bridges, and keep the maintenance sheds running. Simple work for a simple man. Most days, I like the quiet. February 15th, 1984 was not one of those days. The weather report said light snow, maybe an inch or two. By noon, the sky looked like someone had torn open a gray wool blanket and shook it out over Hemlock Ridge. I was working at the maintenance shed near the old logging road about 8 miles from the main ranger station. The shed sits in a small clearing surrounded by thick hemlock trees that block most of the wind. I was fixing a busted chainsaw when the temperature dropped fast. Real fast. 1 minute I'm working in my flannel shirt, next minute I can see my breath. The snow started coming down so hard I couldn't see the tree line 20 feet away. Well, hell, I said to myself, looking out the shed's single window. My truck was already covered in white. The radio crackled. "Thornburg, you copy?" I grabbed the handheld from the workbench. "Yeah, I'm here, Mike." Mike Henderson was the senior ranger. Been doing this job for 20 years. Good man, but he worried too much. "Silas, this storm's getting worse. Weather Service is calling it a freak system. Could dump 2 feet in the next few hours." I looked at my watch, 2:30 in the afternoon. Should I try to make it back? Static filled the air for a few seconds. "Negative. Road's already getting bad. You got enough supplies to stay put?" I did a quick check. The shed had a wood-burning stove, plenty of split logs, some canned food, and a sleeping bag for emergencies. "Yeah, I'm good. Got heat and food." "All right. Storm should pass by morning. Check in at 8 a.m. "Will do." The radio went quiet. I set it down and looked around the shed. 12 by 16 feet, concrete floor, metal walls, and a tin roof. Not fancy, but it would do. I'd spent worse nights in worse places. I got the wood stove going and settled in to wait. The wind picked up outside, making the metal walls creak and groan. Snow kept piling up against the windows. By 4 o'clock, I couldn't see anything but white. That's when I heard the first sound. A scratching noise like fingernails on wood. It came from somewhere under the floor. I figured it was just the building settling, or maybe a mouse looking for warmth. Old buildings make all kinds of noises. The scratching stopped, then started again. This time it sounded bigger, and it was moving. I grabbed a flashlight and checked around the shed's foundation. The concrete floor sat on a raised foundation with maybe 3 feet of crawl space underneath. In summer, you could see daylight through the gaps, but now snow had drifted against the sides, blocking most of the openings. The scratching came again, directly under where I was standing. Something was down there. I knocked on the floor with my boot heel. The scratching stopped instantly. Then after about 10 seconds, I heard what sounded like something knocking back. 3 soft taps against the concrete. My hands got a little sweaty. Animals don't knock. I tried to radio Mike, but got nothing but static. The storm was probably messing with the signal. I was on my own until morning. The temperature kept dropping. Even with the wood stove going full blast, I could see frost forming on the inside of the windows. This wasn't natural. February in Kentucky gets cold, but not like this. Not this fast. I checked my thermometer, 20 below zero. That was impossible. The scratching started. Up again, but now it was coming from multiple spots under the floor. Like several somethings were down there, all moving at once, and they were getting louder. I grabbed a crowbar from the tool rack and pried up one of the loose floorboards near the corner. The wood came up easy, revealing a dark space that smelled like wet earth and something else, something rotten. I shined the flashlight down into the crawl space. The beam caught something pale and wet moving just at the edge of the light. It was long and thick as my arm, with no legs or eyes that I could see. When the light hit it, the thing curled up and slithered away into the darkness. I dropped the floorboard back into place and grabbed my rifle from the truck. A .30, 06 that had never failed me. If something wanted to come up through my floor, it was going to meet some lead first. The scratching was getting more organized now. It moved in patterns, like whatever was down there was testing the floor, looking for weak spots. And there were more of them. A lot more. I sat in the corner, farthest from the sounds, and kept my rifle ready. Outside, the wind howled and the snow kept falling. The temperature gauge read 25 below now. That's when I realized something that made my blood turn cold. The things under the floor weren't trying to get warm. They were trying to get out. The scratching turned into digging. I could hear dirt and debris falling somewhere under the concrete. Whatever was down there had claws or teeth strong enough to dig through frozen ground. I tried the radio again. Still nothing. A new sound joined the digging. A wet, sliding noise like someone dragging a garden hose full of water across rough concrete. It moved from one side of the shed to the other, then back again. Testing. Hunting. I checked my watch. 6:15 p.m. Still 12 hours until I was supposed to check in with Mike. The wood stove was burning hot, but the temperature in the shed kept dropping. My breath came out in thick white puffs. Frost covered everything now, even the inside walls. Whatever was happening outside was beyond any storm I'd ever seen. The sliding sound stopped. Everything went quiet except for the wind. Then I heard voices. "Help me!" came a muffled cry from under the floor. "Please, help me!" I knew that voice. Jimmy Dawson, one of the other maintenance guys. But Jimmy was supposed to be back at the main station. He'd left 3 days ago after finishing repairs on the North Trail Bridge. "Jimmy?" I called out. "That you?" "Silas," the voice replied. "I'm trapped down here. Can't move my legs. Please get me out." Something was wrong. Jimmy's voice sounded strange, like he was talking through water or his mouth was full of something. And how the hell did he get under my shed? "Where are you exactly?" I asked, moving closer to the floor. "Right here, right under you. Please, it's so cold." I pressed my ear to the floorboard. Jimmy's voice was definitely coming from directly beneath me, but it sounded hollow, like he was in a much bigger space than the 3-foot crawl space I'd seen. "Jimmy, I'm going to pry up this board and get you out, okay?" "Yes, please. Hurry." I grabbed the crowbar again and worked at the loose board. It came up with a groan, and I shined the flashlight down into the hole. The crawl space was gone. Instead, there was a tunnel. A perfectly round tunnel that dropped down into darkness. The walls were smooth and wet, like something had carved them out with acid. And the smell that came up from it made me gag. It was the smell of rotting meat and sewage. "Jimmy?" I called down. His voice came from much deeper now. Maybe 20 feet down. "I can see your light. I'm hurt bad, Silas. Real bad." I lowered the flashlight as far as I could reach. The tunnel went straight down for maybe 15 feet, then curved away into blackness. The walls were covered with some kind of thick, clear slime that reflected the light. "I don't see you, Jimmy. I'm further down. You have to come get me. I can't move." Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to go down that hole. But if Jimmy was really trapped down there, hurt and helpless, I couldn't just leave him. I tied a rope around the support beam and tested it. It would hold my weight. I grabbed a spare flashlight, my knife, and started lowering myself into the tunnel. The walls were warm and wet. The slime had a thick, oily feel that made my hands slip on the rope. The smell got worse as I went deeper, like something had died and been left to rot in the heat. I reached the curve in the tunnel and called out, "Jimmy, where are you?" His voice came from ahead, but fainter now. "Keep coming. Almost there." I followed the tunnel as it curved to the right, then left, then right again. The walls stayed perfectly smooth, like they'd been carved by some kind of machine. But no machine could dig tunnels this fast. And how deep was I now? 50 feet? More? The tunnel opened into a wider chamber. I swept the flashlight around and almost dropped it. The chamber was full of bones. Human bones, scattered across the floor like broken toys. Skulls with jawbones missing, rib cages cracked open, leg bones gnawed down to nothing. And everywhere, that thick, clear slime covering everything like plastic wrap. Jimmy? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Right here, Silas. I turned the light toward the voice and saw him. Jimmy Dawson was pinned against the far wall of the chamber, stuck in the slime like a fly in amber. But he wasn't hurt. He was being digested. The slime had eaten through his clothes and was working on his skin. His legs were already gone from the knees down, dissolved into nothing. His eyes were gone too, leaving black holes that wept clear fluid. But he was still talking. Help me, Silas. Get me out of here. I stumbled backward, fighting not to throw up. Jesus Christ, Jimmy. What happened to you? It got me 3 days ago. Been trying to call for help, but no one comes down here. No one except you. 3 days. Jimmy had been alive and aware for 3 days while whatever lived in these tunnels slowly ate him alive. Something moved in the shadows behind Jimmy. Something long and pale that shifted in the darkness like a living rope. Then I saw more movement. Dozens of long, thick shapes writhing in the slime-covered walls. Run, Jimmy whispered, and his voice was different now. Desperate. Human. Run, Silas. Don't let them take you alive. The things in the walls started moving toward me. I could see them clearly now. They looked like giant earthworms, but with rows of tiny teeth around circular mouths. Each one was as thick as my leg and 6 feet long, and there were so many of them I couldn't count. I turned and ran for the tunnel, but more worms were already sliding down from above. They moved fast, faster than anything that big should move. I drew my knife and slashed at the first one that came close. The blade cut through its pale skin and black blood sprayed across the tunnel wall. The worm made a sound like air escaping from a tire and curled in on itself. But 3 more took its place, dropping from cracks in the ceiling I hadn't noticed before. I fought my way back up the tunnel, cutting and stabbing at anything that moved. The worms were everywhere now, sliding out of holes in the walls, dropping from above, rising from below. Their teeth caught my jacket and tore long strips of fabric away. One of them wrapped around my ankle, and I felt sharp pain as its teeth found skin. I reached the rope and climbed faster than I ever had in my life. Behind me, the tunnel was full of pale, writhing shapes and the sound of teeth clicking together. The worms followed me up, but they moved slower in the narrow space. I ed myself out of the hole, and slammed the floorboard back into place. Then I dragged the wood stove over and set it on top of the board. The metal was still hot enough to burn skin. The scratching started immediately, but now it was frantic, angry. The floorboard bulged upward as something big pushed against it from below. The wood stove rocked but held. I grabbed my rifle and backed toward the door. My ankle was bleeding where the worm had bitten me, and I could feel something cold spreading up my leg, some kind of venom or poison. Outside, the storm was still raging, but I didn't care. I had to get out of this shed and back to the main station. I had to warn Mike and the others. I opened the door and stepped out into the worst blizzard I'd ever seen. That's when I realized I wasn't alone out here either. The snow around the shed was covered with tracks, dozens of them, long parallel grooves in the snow, like someone had dragged heavy ropes across the ground. The tracks led away from the shed in all directions, disappearing into the white darkness. Something moved in the tree line, a pale shape slithering between the hemlock trunks, too big to be anything natural. I was surrounded. The cold hit me like a physical blow. The thermometer outside the shed read 40 below zero now, which was impossible. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and the snow was coming down like someone was dumping it from buckets. But I could see the tracks clearly. They formed a perfect circle around the shed about 50 feet out. Inside the circle, the snow was churned up and stained with dark patches that might have been blood. Outside the circle, nothing. Like whatever made those tracks was keeping something in, or keeping everything else out. My truck was buried under 3 feet of snow, but that didn't matter. The worm tracks led right to it. They'd gone underneath somehow, maybe through the undercarriage. I wasn't getting out of here on wheels. The pain in my ankle was getting worse. I rolled up my pant leg and saw 2 small puncture wounds, already turning black, around the edges. The skin around the bite felt numb and cold, even colder than the air. I needed to move, but where? The main station was 8 miles through heavy forest on a road I couldn't see anymore, and those tracks showed the worms were moving above ground now, hunting in the snow. Behind me, something heavy slammed against the shed's metal wall. Then again, the whole building shook. They were trying to break through. I started walking toward the tree line, following what I thought was the old logging road. Each step was agony on my bitten ankle, and the numbness was spreading up toward my knee. Whatever they'd injected me with was working fast. 50 feet from the shed, I stopped. There was something wrong with the trees ahead. The hemlocks were bent inward, their branches twisted and broken like something huge had pushed through them, but not from outside, from underneath. The roots were torn up, leaving dark holes in the snow-covered ground. A hole about 6 feet across yawned open right where the road should be. I could see down into it maybe 15 feet before it curved away into darkness. The edges were perfectly smooth, just like the tunnel under the shed. There were more holes, dozens of them, scattered through the forest like a minefield. Each one was a perfect circle. Each one led down into the earth. The worms hadn't just made tunnels under my shed. They'd honeycombed the entire area. Something moved in the hole nearest to me. I raised the rifle and waited. A pale head emerged from the darkness. Not a worm. Human. It was Sarah Martinez, another ranger who worked the southern trails. But like Jimmy, something was terribly wrong with her. Her skin was gray and wet, her eyes were solid black, and when she opened her mouth to speak, I could see rows of small, pointed teeth. "Silas," she said, and her voice was like gravel in a blender. "We've been waiting for you." More heads appeared in other holes. Frank Collins from trail maintenance, his face half melted. Betty Hawkins from the visitor center, her hair gone and her scalp covered with bite marks. Tom Bradley, the senior mechanic, his lower jaw missing entirely. They were all people I worked with. All people who should have been safe at the main station. "What happened to you?" I asked, backing away from the holes. Sarah smiled, and black liquid ran down her chin. "We got hungry," she said. "So hungry. And now you're going to feed us." They started climbing out of the holes, all of them. But they moved wrong, like their bones had been broken and reset in new positions. Sarah's arms bent backward at the elbows. Frank's legs twisted around so his feet pointed behind him. Betty crawled on all fours, but her spine curved up into an impossible arch. I ran. The snow was knee-deep, and my bitten ankle felt like it was on fire, but I crashed through the drifts as fast as I could manage. Behind me, I could hear them coming, not footsteps, but a wet, sliding sound, like they were moving on their bellies. A gunshot echoed through the forest, then another. Someone else was out there. "Help!" I shouted. "Over here!" "Silas?" The voice came from my right, deeper in the trees. It sounded like Mike Henderson. "Where are you?" I changed direction, fighting through a thick stand of young pines. The branches whipped at my face and caught my jacket, but I kept moving. The sliding sounds were getting closer. I found Mike crouched behind a fallen log, his rifle aimed at something I couldn't see. He looked up when I crashed through the brush. "Thank God," he said. "I thought you were dead." "The others," I gasped, pointing back the way I'd come. "Sarah, Frank, all of them. Something's wrong with them." Mike nodded grimly. "I know. I've been tracking them for an hour. They're not human anymore, Silas. Something's taken them over. We have to get to the main station. Warn everyone." "Can't. Station's gone." I stared at him. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, it's not there in town. More. Just a big hole in the ground and some pieces of the roof. Whatever these things are, they came up from underneath and took the whole building down." The sliding sounds were getting closer. Mike raised his rifle and fired into the darkness. Something screamed, high and shrill like a steam whistle. "How many rounds you got?" he asked. I checked my rifle. 12. "I got 8. Won't be enough." He was right. If all the rangers were infected or dead, and these worm things were spread throughout the forest, We couldn't fight them all. "The radio tower," I said. "Up on Bald Mountain. If we can reach it, call for help." Mike nodded. 5 miles north. Think you can make it on that leg?" I looked down. The black discoloration had spread to my knee and I couldn't feel my foot anymore. But it was our only chance. "I'll make it." We started moving north, keeping to the high ground and avoiding the obvious holes. But the worms had been busy. Every few hundred yards we found new tunnels, new disturbances in the earth. They were undermining everything. We'd gone maybe a mile when we heard the helicopters, 2 of them flying low and fast from the south. Military helicopters with searchlights cutting through the snow. "They're looking for us," Mike said. We broke cover and ran into a clearing, waving our arms and shouting. The lead helicopter circled twice, then settled into a landing about 50 yards away. Soldiers in winter gear jumped out and ran toward us. "Thank God," I said. "How did you know we were here?" The lead soldier pulled off his helmet. It was Colonel James Hartley, someone I'd never seen before. His eyes were solid black, just like Sarah's had been. "We've been waiting for you, Mr. Thornburg," he said, smiling with too many teeth. The other soldiers raised their weapons, but instead of rifles, they carried what looked like metal tubes with wide mouths. "Capture weapons." Mike shot the nearest soldier in the chest. The man went down, but black liquid poured from the wound instead of blood. He got back up and kept coming. "Run!" Mike shouted. We scattered in different directions. I heard gunfire behind me, then Mike screaming, then nothing. I was alone again, stumbling through the snow with my dead leg and my dwindling ammunition. The helicopter lifted off and began circling the area, its searchlight sweeping back and forth. But I had one advantage. I knew these mountains better than anyone, and I knew a way to reach the radio tower that didn't involve the main trails. The old mine shaft. It was a relic from the 1920s, when they'd tried to dig coal out of Bald Mountain. The project failed after 6 months, but they'd left behind a tunnel that ran almost to the summit. If I could reach the mine entrance, I could follow the tunnel up to the tower. The entrance was hidden in a grove of oak trees about 2 miles northeast. I'd have to cross 3 ridges and 2 valleys, all of it through worm territory, but it was my only chance. I started climbing, using my rifle as a walking stick. Behind me, the helicopter's searchlight swept through the forest like a hungry eye, looking for movement. The black poison from the worm bite had reached my hip now. I could barely feel my entire right side, but I kept moving, one step at a time, toward the mine and the radio tower beyond. I had to warn someone about what was happening here. Someone had to know that the worms weren't just animals. They were organized, intelligent, and they were spreading. Halfway up the first ridge, I looked back and saw lights in the valley below. Lots of lights. Vehicles moving along the roads, helicopters in the air, men with flashlights searching the forest. They weren't trying to rescue anyone. They were trying to contain something, to keep it from spreading beyond these mountains. But I had a terrible feeling they were already too late. The mine entrance was exactly where I remembered it, hidden behind a tangle of dead vines and rusted warning G signs. The metal door had been chained shut 20 years ago, but the chain was corroded and broke easily when I hit it with my rifle butt. The tunnel stretched ahead into perfect darkness. My flashlight beam revealed rotting wooden support beams and rusty rail tracks that disappeared around a bend. The air inside was stale and thick, but it was warm, much warmer than it should have been. I'd made it maybe 100 yards when I realized I wasn't alone in the tunnel. The tracks in the mud weren't from old mining equipment. They were fresh, and they were worm tracks, long parallel grooves in the soft earth leading deeper into the mountain. My ankle was completely numb now, and the black discoloration had spread to my chest. Whatever poison the worm had injected was shutting down my nervous system piece by piece. I probably had an hour before it reached my heart. But I was close to the radio tower. The tunnel curved upward here, following the natural shape of the mountain. If I could just keep moving, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. It was bigger than any space should exist inside a mountain. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above my head, and the walls curved away beyond the reach of my flashlight. But I could see what filled the chamber, and it made me understand everything. Eggs. Thousands upon thousands of pale, translucent eggs, each one the size of a watermelon. They were arranged in perfect rows across the chamber floor, and each one glowed with a faint inner light. Inside each egg, I could see something moving, something with teeth. This wasn't a worm colony. This was a nursery. And standing guard over the eggs were the missing people. All of them. Not just the rangers I'd worked with, but dozens of others. Hikers who'd gone missing over the past few months. Hunters who never came home. Me. Families who'd vanished without a trace. They were all here, changed into something else. Their skin was pale and wet, their eyes were solid black, and their mouths were full of needle-sharp teeth. But they were still conscious, still aware. I could see it in their faces. "Welcome, Silas," said a voice from the darkness. A figure stepped into my flashlight beam. It looked human at first glance, but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, with arms that hung down past its knees. Its face was smooth and featureless except for a wide mouth full of teeth. "I am what you would call the Queen," it said. "Though I am neither female nor royal in any sense you would understand. I am simply the first. The one who learned to change." "Change into what?" I managed to say. "Into whatever is necessary to survive. Your kind has ruled this world for such a brief time, yet you act as though it belongs to you. We have been here much longer, waiting, watching, learning." The Queen gestured to the eggs around us. "Each of these contains a new form, a perfect fusion of your species and mine. They will hatch soon and spread across your world, changing everything they touch, making it better." "Better?" I looked at the infected people standing motionless around the chamber. "You mean dead?" The Queen laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Not dead. Evolved. Your friend Jimmy, for example. He has experienced sensations beyond anything his original form could imagine. The dissolution of flesh, the unity of the hive mind, the perfect harmony of collective consciousness. He was being eaten alive. He was being transformed, as you will be once the venom completes its work." I looked down at my chest. The black discoloration had reached my neck. I could feel my heart beating irregularly, skipping beats as the poison affected the muscle. "Why the storm?" I asked, stalling for time while I tried to figure out a way to escape. "The cold drives us deeper, forces us to seek new sources of warmth. Your maintenance shed was the perfect incubation site. Warm is elated with a single occupant to serve as the initial host. But you already had hosts, all these people. We needed someone with knowledge of your communication systems, someone who could help us reach others. You were chosen specifically, Mr. Thornburg. We have been watching you for weeks." The infected people started moving closer, forming a circle around me. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, like parts of a single organism. "The transformation is nearly complete," the Queen said. "Soon you will understand the beauty of what we offer. Unity, purpose, an end to the loneliness that has plagued your species since the beginning." My rifle was getting heavy in my hands, but I raised it anyway. "Sorry, I like being human." I fired at the Queen. The bullet caught her in the chest and spun her around, but she didn't fall. Black liquid poured from the wound, but she straightened up and smiled. "Crude weapons for a crude species," she said. The infected people rushed me from all sides. I got off 3 more shots before they reached me, dropping 2 of them. But there were too many. Hands grabbed my arms, my legs, my rifle. They lifted me off the ground and carried me toward a section of the chamber wall that was covered with that thick, clear slime. "No," I said, struggling against their grip. "No, please." "It will only hurt for a moment," the Queen assured me. "Then you will see the truth. You will see how beautiful it is to be part of something greater than yourself." They pressed me against the slime wall, and I felt the thick substance begin to engulf my legs. It was warm and slightly acidic, already beginning to dissolve my clothes. In a few hours, it would start on my flesh. But the Queen had made a mistake. In her arrogance, she'd revealed the truth about the eggs. This was a nursery, which meant it was the heart of their entire operation. Destroy the nursery, and you destroy the future of the invasion. I still had one grenade left on my belt. An old fragmentation grenade I'd carried since my army days, more as a good luck charm than anything else. But if I could reach it. The slime was up to my waist now, but my right arm was still free. The infected people had stepped back to watch the transformation, confident that I was helpless. I pulled the pin on the grenade and held it tight against my chest. "You want to know about human nature?" I said to the Queen. "We don't like to lose." I released the lever. 4 seconds. The Queen realized what was happening and screamed. The infected people rushed toward me, but they were too late. 3 seconds. I thought about my ex-wife, my old job at the factory, the quiet mornings in the forest before all this started. 2 seconds. I hoped someone would find the wreckage and understand what had happened here. 1 second. I hoped it would be enough. The explosion tore through the chamber like the fist of God. I woke up 3 days later in a military hospital in Louisville. The doctors said I'd been found in a collapsed mine shaft on Bald Mountain, suffering from severe frostbite, multiple lacerations, and poisoning from an unknown biological agent. They wanted to know how I'd survived the explosion that brought down half the mountain. I told them the truth. Most of it anyway. The official report said there had been a seismic event in the Daniel Boone National Forest, probably caused by shifting underground caverns. Several buildings had been damaged, including the main ranger station. 6 Forest Service employees were listed as missing and presumed dead, including myself until they found me in the mine. The area around Hemlock Ridge was declared unstable and closed to the public indefinitely. But I know better. They found the eggs, or what was left of them after the explosion. The military took everything away in sealed containers, along with samples of that clear slime and the remains of what they're calling previously unknown cave organisms, the black paws. Ison in my system took 2 weeks to clear out completely. The doctors were amazed that I survived it at all. They said the cold probably slowed its progress just enough to keep it from reaching my heart. I don't think it was the cold. I think it was something else. Something the Queen and her creatures didn't understand about human biology. We're tougher than we look, and we don't give up easy. They offered me a medical retirement, full pension, disability pay. I took it. I'm done with forests for a while, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I got them all. The explosion destroyed the nursery and killed the Queen, but those tunnels went deep, really deep. And there might be other colonies, other nurseries, in other parts of the forest, other parts of the world. Last week I saw a news report about a mining accident in West Virginia. Cave-in at a coal operation, 7 miners missing. The reporter mentioned strange organisms found in the debris, but the story disappeared from the news after 1 day. 2 days ago, I got a call from a forest ranger in Oregon. He'd heard about what happened in Kentucky and wanted to talk. Said they were finding unusual tracks in the snow near Mount Hood, perfectly round tunnels appearing overnight. Animals acting strange. I told him to call the military, to evacuate the area and call in the hazmat teams. I hope he listened. The thing about invasions is that they don't stop with one defeat. If there's one colony, there are probably others. If there's one queen, there might be more. I keep my rifle cleaned and loaded now. I've got a go bag packed with supplies, radio, ammunition, and I've been learning everything I can about biology, about parasites and hive minds and species that can change their form to mimic their prey. Because I don't think this is over. Sometimes, on cold nights when the wind is blowing hard, I can hear scratching, sounds under my floorboards, soft at first, then getting louder, getting closer. And sometimes I wonder if the poison really left my system completely, or if there's still some of it in. There, changing me in ways the doctors can't detect, changing me into something that can hear the call of the hive. But mostly, I just keep my rifle close and wait for the next report of missing miners or strange tunnels or animals acting wrong. Because someone has to be ready. Someone has to be watching. Someone has to remember that the hunger beneath the ground is patient and persistent, and it's still down there, waiting. My name is Cordelia Mistwood, and I've been a park ranger for 22 years. Most folks think that's strange for a woman, especially back in 1967, but I earned my place in these West Virginia mountains the hard way. Before I took this job, I taught history at the university for 15 years. I know how to research, how to piece together facts, and how to stay calm when things don't make sense. The Monongahela National Forest is my home now. I know every trail, every creek, every old cabin foundation hidden in these hills. But there's one place that's always bothered me. A valley we call Eldritch Hollow. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong. Tall oak trees, a clear stream, and wildflowers that bloom even in late fall. But something feels wrong there. Always has. I first noticed it 5 years ago. Small things at first. My compass would spin in circles when I walked through certain spots. Birds would go quiet suddenly, like someone had thrown a blanket over the whole forest. And there were the cold spots, patches of air so chilly they'd make your breath fog even on warm days. The other rangers avoided Eldritch Hollow when they could. They made jokes about it being haunted, but I could see the worry in their eyes. Jim Patterson, who'd worked these mountains for 30 years, once told me he'd rather walk 10 miles around the hollow than cut through it to save time. "There's something not right about that place, Cordelia," he'd said, looking out at the valley from the ridge above. My granddad used to tell stories about strange things happening down there. Said his granddad told him the same stories. Goes back generations. I should have listened to Jim. But I'm a historian at heart, and mysteries call to me like moths to a flame. It was October when I found the first journal. I was doing my monthly check of the old fire tower at the north end of the hollow. The tower hadn't been used since the 1940s, but we still had to inspect it for damage. The wooden steps creaked under my boots as I climbed up to the observation deck. That's when I saw it. A leather notebook tucked behind one of the support beams. The cover was weather-beaten but still intact. I opened it carefully, and my heart started racing as I read the first entry. Asterisk. My name is Thomas Hartwell. I am the forest ranger assigned to this territory. The year is 1887, and I fear I may not live to see 1888. Something stalks these woods, something that should not exist. The handwriting was shaky, like the man who wrote it was scared or cold. I flipped through the pages, seeing dates from the summer and fall of 1887. Thomas wrote about strange encounters, about hikers who disappeared, about something that hunted in ways that defied all natural law. But here's what really got my attention. He described the exact same things I'd been noticing. The spinning compass, the sudden silence, the impossible cold spots. This was 80 years ago, but it was like reading my own observations. I sat there on that creaky platform as the sun started to set, reading Thomas Hartwell's journal from cover to cover. His last entry was dated November 15th, 1887. Asterisk. It knows I'm here. It's been watching me for weeks now. I can feel its eyes on me even when I can't see it. Sarah thinks I should leave this job, find work in town, but I can't abandon my post. These mountains need protection from what's down there. God help me. I'm going to try to stop it tonight. The journal ended there. No more entries. No record of what happened to Thomas Hartwell. I climbed down from the tower as darkness fell, my mind racing. Back at the ranger station, I spent hours going through old records, but I couldn't find any mention of Thomas Hartwell. No employment records, no incident reports, nothing. It was like he'd never existed. But I had his journal. I had his words. And deep down, I knew every word was true. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Thomas's description of being watched, of feeling eyes on him in the darkness. And as I lay there in my cabin, listening to the wind in the trees, I started to feel it too. Something was out there, waiting. The next morning I drove back to Eldritch Hollow with Thomas's journal in my backpack. I needed to see the place through his eyes, to walk where he'd walked. Maybe I could find some clue about what had happened to him. The autumn air was crisp and clear as I hiked down into the valley. I'd been through this area hundreds of times, but today felt different. The trees seemed taller, casting deeper shadows. The stream sounded louder, more urgent. I was about halfway through the hollow when I found the second journal. It was sitting on a fallen log beside the trail, like someone had just set it down and walked away. But the leather cover was aged and worn, obviously old. My hands trembled as I opened it. Asterisk. My name is William Crawford, Forest Ranger. The year is 1923. I found Thomas Hartwell's journal yesterday, and now I understand what I'm up against. This couldn't be happening. 2 journals, both from rangers who'd worked this area decades apart, both describing the same impossible things. William's entries started in September 1923. He wrote about finding Thomas's journal hidden in the fire tower, exactly where I'd found it. But according to William, there had been a second journal with it. Thomas's personal notes that William kept, leaving only the first journal behind. Asterisk. Thomas tried to fight it and failed, William wrote. I've learned from his mistakes. The creature, I don't know what else to call it, doesn't follow normal rules. It can be in multiple places at once. It can make you see things that haven't happened yet, or things that happened long ago. Time means nothing to it. I sat on that log, reading page after page of William's increasingly desperate observations. He described the same cold spots, the same compass problems. But he also wrote about things Thomas hadn't mentioned, glimpses of people in old-fashioned clothes walking through the forest, voices calling for help in languages he didn't recognize, and most disturbing of all, brief visions of his own death. Asterisk. October 12th, 1923. It showed me how I'm going to die. I saw myself standing in the clearing by the old oak tree, and then, God, I can't write it down. But it was so real, so vivid, like watching a movie of my own future. My blood ran cold. There was an old oak tree in the clearing about a quarter-mile ahead of me. I'd passed it many times, never thinking much about it. But now, I kept reading. William's final entries were from late October 1923. Asterisk, October 28th. 2 hikers went missing yesterday. College boys from Charleston came up here for the weekend. Found their camp this morning. Tents torn to shreds, sleeping bags scattered like leaves. But no blood, no bodies, just emptiness. Asterisk, October 30th. It's getting bolder. I saw it clearly for the first time today. Not one creature, but many. Or maybe one creature that looks different each time I see it. Sometimes it's tall and thin with too many joints. Sometimes it's a shadow that moves wrong. Sometimes it looks human. But the eyes are all wrong. Asterisk. October 31st. Halloween. How fitting. I'm going to try what Thomas couldn't do. I've figured out part of how it works. It doesn't just hunt in our time. It hunts across time. Past, present, future. They're all the same to it. That's why finding these journals feels so strange. That's why the dates seem impossible. We're not the first rangers to face this thing, and we won't be the last. Asterisk. But maybe if I can disrupt its pattern, I can save whoever comes after me. The journal ended there, just like Thomas's had. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't notice the forest had gone. It's completely silent around me. No birds, no insects, no wind through the leaves. When I finally looked up, the world seemed frozen. And that's when I saw him. A man in an old-style Ranger's uniform was standing about 50 feet away watching me. The uniform looked like something from the 1920s, all browns and greens with brass buttons. He raised his hand and waved at me, and I could see his mouth moving like he was calling out, but I couldn't hear any sound. I blinked, and he was gone. My hands were shaking as I stuffed William's journal into my backpack alongside Thomas's. This was impossible. I was a rational person, a former professor. I didn't believe in ghosts or time travel or any of that nonsense, but I couldn't deny what I'd just seen. I started walking again, faster now, wanting to get out of the hollow before dark. But as I walked, I became aware of footsteps behind me. measured, steady footsteps that matched my pace exactly. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. The footsteps resumed. I turned around, but there was no one there, just the empty trail stretching back into the trees. That's when I heard the voices, faint at first, like people talking in another room. But as I listened, they got clearer. Two men having a conversation about patrol routes and supply schedules. Normal ranger talk, except the voices sounded old-fashioned, formal in a way that people don't talk anymore. One of the voices sounded familiar. I pulled Thomas's journal out and flipped to a page where he'd written his full name. Asterisk, Thomas Eugene Hartwell, Forest Ranger, Monongahela National Forest. The voice I was hearing matched what I imagined Thomas would sound like. Deep, serious, with a slight accent that might have been local to these mountains 80 years ago. But the other voice, I'd never heard it before, yet it seemed familiar too. Like a half-remembered song, or a face glimpsed in a crowd. The voices were getting closer. I started running. I ran through the hollow like something was chasing me, and maybe something was. The footsteps behind me got faster, keeping pace no matter how fast I went. The voices got louder, more urgent, and I could swear I heard my own name being called. Asterisk Cordelia. Cordelia, wait. But I didn't wait. I ran until I reached my truck, threw the journals into the passenger seat, and drove away without looking back. That night, I sat in my cabin with both journals spread out on my kitchen table, trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. The logical part of my mind said I was having some kind of breakdown, maybe from too many years of isolation in these mountains. But another part of me, the part that had spent decades studying history and learning to recognize truth from fiction, knew that what I'd seen and heard was real. Thomas Hartwell and William Crawford had been real rangers who'd faced something impossible in Eldritch Hollow. They'd both tried to fight it and failed, and now somehow I was being drawn into the same struggle. The question was, would I end up like them, leaving behind only a journal for the next ranger to find? I spent 3 days researching everything I could about Eldritch Hollow. I drove to the county courthouse, checked newspaper archives, even called some local historians. What I found made my blood run cold. People had been disappearing in that valley for over a century. Not just hikers and campers, but locals too. Hunters who knew these woods like their own backyard. Children who wandered off and were never found. And every few decades, a forest ranger would quit suddenly or just disappear altogether. The newspapers from 1887 mentioned a Thomas Hartwell, local forest ranger, who had vanished in November. The sheriff at the time suspected he'd fallen into a ravine, but no body was ever recovered. In 1923, there was a small article about Ranger William Crawford, who was found dead near the old oak in the haunted valley on November 1st. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the reporter noted that Crawford was only 32 years old and had been in perfect health. The pattern was clear, and it terrified me. Every 40 years or so, something in Eldritch Hollow would claim a forest ranger, Thomas in 1887, William in 1923, and if the pattern held, 1967 was my year. I knew I should report what I'd found to my supervisor, maybe even contact the state police. But what would I tell them? That I'd found 2 journals from dead rangers who described encounters with a time-traveling monster? They'd think I'd lost my mind. So instead, I did what historians do best. I kept researching. On the 4th day, I drove back to Eldritch Hollow. I told myself I was just going to observe, to document what I could see and hear. I brought a camera, a tape recorder, even a thermometer to measure those cold spots I'd been noticing. The hollow felt different when I arrived, more alive somehow. The trees seemed to whisper to each other in the breeze, and I kept catching glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. When I'd turned to look, there was nothing there. I set up my equipment near the stream and started taking measurements. The temperature readings were bizarre. I found spots where the air dropped 30 degrees in the space of a single step. My compass spun wildly in certain areas, pointing in different directions every few seconds. And then I started hearing the voices again. This time, there were 3 of them. Thomas's deep, formal tone, William's slightly higher voice with its 1920s cadence, and a third voice I didn't recognize at first, younger, nervous, speaking with an accent I couldn't quite place. They seemed to be having a conversation, but not with each other. It was like listening to 3 different phone calls happening at the same time. Thomas was talking about tracking something through the forest. Asterisk. The prints are wrong. Too deep, and they change shape between steps. William was discussing strategy. It's not just one creature. It's the same creature appearing at different times. Past, present, future, they're all happening at once here. The third voice was asking questions. Asterisk. But how do we stop something that exists outside of time? How do we fight something that can see our every move before we make it? That's when I realized the third voice was mine. I was hearing myself. But from when? The future, the past? Some other version of events where I'd already had this conversation? My hands shook as I tried to record the voices, but when I played back the tape later, there was nothing but static and the sound of wind through trees. I was packing up my equipment when I saw the first hiker. He was standing about 100 yards away near the tree line. Young man, maybe 25, wearing modern clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, hiking boots. He had a backpack and was carrying a map, looking around like he was trying to figure out where he was. I called out to him. "Hey, you okay over there?" He looked up and waved, then started walking toward me. But as he got closer, something felt wrong. His movements were too smooth, like he was gliding rather than walking. And his face stayed exactly the same from 50 yards away as it did from 10 feet away. No change in detail, no normal perspective shift. When he was about 20 feet from me, he stopped and smiled. It was a normal smile, friendly and warm. But his eyes were completely black. Not just dark, black like empty spaces where eyes should be. "Beautiful day for hiking," he said, and his voice was perfectly normal too. "Are you familiar with these trails?" I backed away slowly, my heart hammering. I'm a park ranger. Is there something I can help you with?" "Oh, a ranger." He seemed delighted. "Then you must know about the history of this place, the stories, the previous rangers who worked here." He knew. Somehow, this thing wearing the shape of a hiker knew exactly what I discovered. "I don't know what you mean," I lied. His smile got wider. "Thomas Hartwell, William Crawford, and now Cordelia Mistwood. Such a lovely name, Cordelia. It means heart of the sea, doesn't it?" I'd never told anyone what my name meant. I'd learned it myself when I was 12, looking it up in a book about Celtic names. The sea is very deep, Cordelia. Very dark. Full of things that should stay hidden. The hiker tilted his head, and I heard his neck crack like breaking wood. But some secrets refused to stay buried. I ran. Behind me, I heard laughter. Not the normal laughter of one person, but multiple voices laughing at different pitches, like a whole crowd of people finding something hilarious. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. When I looked back, the hiker was gone, but there were more figures moving through the trees. Lots more. Some in modern clothes, some in old-fashioned outfits, some wearing forest ranger uniforms from different eras, all of them watching me. That night I barricaded myself in my cabin and spent hours writing down everything I could remember. Every detail, every conversation, every impossible thing I'd seen. If something happened to me, at least there would be a record. Around midnight I heard a knock at my door. I looked through the window and saw William Crawford standing on my porch. He was exactly as I'd imagined him from reading his journal. Tall, thin, with kind eyes and worry lines around his mouth. He was wearing the same 1920s Ranger uniform I'd seen before. He knocked again, then pressed his face to the window. When he saw me looking back, he mouthed a single word. "Run." Behind him I could see Thomas Hartwell walking up the path to my cabin, and behind Thomas, dozens of other figures were emerging from the forest. Hikers, campers, hunters, all the people who had disappeared in Eldritch Hollow over the decades. all of them coming for me. I grabbed the 2 journals and climbed out my back window, heading for my truck. But when I got there, I found a 3rd journal sitting on the drive, bar's seat. This one was newer than the others, with my name written on the cover in my own handwriting. Inside, I found entries dated from tomorrow, next week, next month, all in my handwriting, describing events that hadn't happened yet. Asterisk, October 15th, 1967. I know what I have to do now. The creature. I've figured out what it really is. It's not just hunting across time. It is time, or at least the part of time that deals with endings. It feeds on the moment when people realize they're going to die. Asterisk. October 16th, 1967. Thomas and William were right about one thing. Fighting it directly is impossible. But they were wrong about something else. We don't have to fight it alone. Every ranger who's faced this thing is still here, still fighting. We just have to figure out how to coordinate across decades. Asterisk. October 17th, 1967. I think I understand now. The journals aren't just records. They're messages, instructions. Each ranger leaves behind what they've learned, hoping the next one will be smarter, stronger, better prepared. Asterisk. October 18th, 1967. Tonight is Halloween, the night when the barriers are thinnest. If I'm going to break this cycle, it has to be tonight. The journal ended there, but I could see faint impressions on the remaining pages, like someone had written on them and then erased the words. I was still staring at my own future handwriting when I heard footsteps approaching. Not the measured steps of one person, but dozens of footsteps, all walking in perfect synchronization. They were coming for me, and this time I had nowhere left to run. The figures surrounded my truck, but they didn't attack. They just stood there, watching me with eyes that reflected the moonlight like mirrors. Thomas Hartwell stepped forward, and when he spoke, I could actually hear his voice clearly for the first time. "Cordelia," he said, and his voice was sad, tired. "We've been trying to warn you." "Warn me about what?" I clutched the journals to my chest. "What is this thing? What does it want?" William Crawford appeared beside Thomas. "It's not what you think. It's not some monster that hunts people. It's something much worse." "Then what?" Thomas gestured to the crowd of figures around us. "Look closely. Really look." I did. And that's when I realized the truth that made my stomach drop to my feet. They weren't ghosts. They weren't spirits of the dead. They were all versions of the same 3 people. Dozens of Thomas Hartwells from different times, different choices, different outcomes. Dozens of William Crawfords, each one slightly different from the others. And scattered among them, I could see versions of myself. Some older, some younger, some wearing different clothes or hairstyles. "Time isn't a line here," William explained. "It's more like a knot, all twisted up and folded back on itself. Every choice we've made, every path we could have taken, they're all real. They all exist at the same time. The creature you've been afraid of," Thomas added, "isn't hunting us. It's trying to untangle the knot, to force time back into a straight line. But if it succeeds, all the alternative versions disappear," I finished, understanding flooding through me. "Only one timeline remains, one version of each of us. And it gets to choose which version survives," said a voice behind me. I turned and saw myself, but not as I was now. This version of me was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and deep lines around my eyes. She was wearing a forest ranger uniform I'd never seen before, more modern than mine. "I'm you from 1987, she said. 20 years from now, if you make the right choices tonight." "What choices?" Another version of me stepped forward, this one younger, maybe from the 1950s based on her uniform. "Every 40 years it offers us the same deal. Except one timeline, usually the one where we die young and heroically, and it will leave the area alone for another generation." "Thomas took the deal in 1887, said an older Thomas Hartwell with a gray beard. "But then he regretted it and tried to fight back. That's why there are so many versions of him here. William figured out how to refuse the deal, added a William Crawford wearing a modern park ranger uniform. But refusing means staying here, existing in all timelines at once, forever. I looked around at all the faces, dozens of versions of the same three people, all the lives we might have lived, all the choices we might have made. There has to be another option, I said. The elderly version of me smiled sadly. That's what we all thought. But we've been trying for 80 years to find another way. This is as close as we've gotten. What about the missing hikers, the people who disappeared? They made their own deals, Thomas said. Agreed to exist only in the timeline where they never entered the hollow. Safe, but... He gestured around us. Not really alive anymore either. I felt the creature's presence before I saw it. The air grew thick and cold, and reality seemed to bend around a shape that my eyes couldn't quite focus on. Sometimes it looked like a tall, thin man in an expensive suit. Sometimes it was just a shadow that moved wrong. Sometimes it was nothing at all, just a voice speaking from empty air. Cordelia Mistwood, it said, and its voice was like the sound of clocks ticking in different rhythms. You have learned much. Now you must choose. Choose what? Your timeline. I offer you the same choice I offered Thomas, William, and all the others. Pick one version of your life to be real. The others will fade away, and this area will be free from complications for another generation. Images flashed through my mind. I saw myself dying heroically while trying to save hikers. I saw myself living to be 90, retiring peacefully and writing books about forest management. I saw myself leaving the rang, or service, and becoming a professor again. I saw myself married, unmarried, rich, poor, happy, sad. Every possible version of my future life. Or, the creature continued, you can refuse, like some of the others have. Stay here forever, existing in all timelines at once, helping to maintain the balance. I looked at all the versions of Thomas and William around me. They'd been trapped here for decades, existing but not really living, fighting a battle they could never win. There's no third option? I asked. There is, said a voice from the crowd. The speaker stepped forward, and I gasped. It was me, but not any version I recognized. This Cordelia was wearing clothes I'd never seen, carrying equipment that looked impossibly advanced. Her eyes were different too, older, sadder, but also more determined. I'm from a timeline that doesn't exist yet, she said. A timeline where we found another way. The creature's presence intensified, and I felt its attention focus on this new version of me like a searchlight. Impossible, it said. I control all timelines in this area. You control the timelines that branch from choices, the new Cordelia said. But you don't control the timelines that branch from understanding. She walked over to me and pressed something into my hand. It was a fourth journal, but this one was different. The pages seemed to shimmer and change as I looked at them, showing different handwriting, different entries, different possibilities. The creature feeds on temporal energy from moments of death and choice, she explained. But it's been trapped here just as long as we have. It wants to leave, to find new areas to hunt. But it can't as long as the time knot exists. Then why doesn't it just leave? Because it created the knot in the first place. It's been feeding here so long, taking so much temporal energy that it broke the normal flow of time. Now it's stuck, just like the rest of us. I looked at the creature, or tried to. It was getting harder to see, more agitated. Is that true? Truth is relative in this place, Janet said, but I could hear uncertainty in its voice for the first time. The new Cordelia smiled. But if we can repair the knot instead of just accepting it or fighting against it. We all go free, I finished. All of us. Even you. The creature was silent for a long moment. Around us, all the different versions of Thomas, William, and myself watched and waited. Finally, it spoke. How? What followed was the strangest collaboration of my life. Working together, me, dozens of versions of myself, Thomas, and William, from from across multiple timelines, and even the temporal creature itself. We began the delicate work of untangling 80 years of twisted time. It wasn't about fighting or making deals. It was about understanding. The creature showed us how it saw time, not as a river flowing forward, but as a vast web of interconnected moments. Every choice created new threads. Every death cut threads short. And here in Eldritch Hollow, those threads had become so tangled that the whole web was breaking down. "I never meant for it to become this way," the creature admitted as we worked. Its form had stabilized somewhat. It looked like a tall, pale man in clothes that seemed to shift between different historical periods. I was hungry. I fed too much too often. By the time I realized what was happening, the damage was done. The solution wasn't simple, but it was elegant. Instead of trying to force time back into one straight line, we had to carefully separate the tangled threads while preserving the essential experiences that had created them. Each version of each person had to choose what they wanted to contribute to the final, unified timeline. The heroic Thomas, who had tried to fight the creature alone. The clever William, who had figured out the temporal mechanics. The determined Cordelia, who refused to give up looking for another option. It took hours, or maybe days, or maybe years. Time moved strangely during the untangling process, but gradually I felt the overlapping versions of myself coming together, each one contributing memories, knowledge, and experiences to create something new. When it was over, I was standing alone in Eldritch Hollow as the sun rose on November 1st, 1967. The forest felt normal again. Birds were singing. My compass pointed steadily north. The stream gurgled peacefully over its rocks. But I wasn't alone, not really. I had memories now from dozens of different versions of myself, from timelines where I'd made different choices or faced different challenges. I remembered being married and single, young and old, brave and cowardly. I remembered lives I'd never lived, but that had been just as real as my own. And I had the journals. All four of them were still there. Thomas's, William's, mine, and the fourth one from the timeline that didn't exist yet. But now they told a complete story instead of fragments of separate tragedies. I walked back to my truck feeling both exhausted and more alive than I'd ever felt before. The temporal creature was gone, not destroyed, but freed to continue its existence somewhere else, hopefully more carefully than before. As I drove out of the hollow, I thought about what I would put in my official report. Area cleared of anomalous temporal disturbances probably wouldn't go over well with my supervisor. But I knew what I had to do. I would write down the whole truth, everything that had happened, and I would leave that record for whoever might need it in the future. Because even though the immediate crisis was over, I had learned something important during those long hours of untangling time. The past never really goes away. The future is always trying to happen. And sometimes, in places where the world wears thin, they all exist at the same time. I spent the next 20 years as a ranger in the Monongahela National Forest. I retired in 1987 at age 72 with a full pension and commendations for my work in historical preservation. I net, ever married, but I lived a full life, traveling and writing and teaching others about the mysteries that hide in America's wild places. But I always kept an eye on Eldritch Hollow. And every year on Halloween night, I would walk down into that valley and listen to the silence, making sure it stayed quiet. Because I remember what the creature told me during those final hours of untangling. Time is like a river, Cordelia. Dam it up in one place and eventually the pressure will find somewhere else to break through. The hollow is peaceful now. But time is vast, and there are other valleys, other forests, other places where the past and future press close together. And sometimes, late at night when the wind is just right, I still hear echoes of voices calling through the darkness, not from the past or future, but from the spaces between moments, where all possibilities exist at once. My name is Cordelia Mistwood. I was a forest ranger for 22 years. And I learned that some mysteries are solved not by fighting them, but by accepting them as part of something larger than ourselves. The journals are hidden safely now, waiting for the next person who needs to understand that time is not a line, but a web, and that every thread in that web matters, even the ones that tangle in the dark. My name is Jeremiah Graveborn, and I need to tell you what happened on Sorrow Mountain before it's too late, before I become something that shouldn't exist. 8 years I'd been a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains. Not long by most standards, but long enough to know when something ain't right in these woods. It was October 1978, and the leaves were dying their beautiful death when Sheriff Mills called me about the livestock killings. 3 farms hit in 2 weeks, Jeremiah, he said over the crackling radio. Something's been feeding on cattle and sheep up near Sorrow Mountain. Farmers are scared senseless. I drove my truck up the winding mountain roads, past the tourist cabins and into the real wilderness where people still lived like their great-grandfathers did. The October air bit at my skin through the open window, carrying the smell of wood smoke and dying leaves. The Hendricks farm was first on my list. Old Tom Hendricks met me at his gate, shotgun cradled in his arms like a baby. "Morning, Tom. Sheriff says you lost some cattle." His weathered face was pale as milk. 3 head, Ranger Graveborn. Something tore them apart during the night. Didn't eat much, just destroyed them, like it was killing for fun. He led me to the pasture where flies buzzed around dark stains in the grass. The cattle were gone. Tom had buried what was left, but the scene told a story I couldn't understand. Claw marks raked the trees 20 feet up. Hoofprints showed the cattle had run in wild circles before whatever got them brought them down. "You see any tracks? Wolf, bear, maybe a big cat?" Tom shook his head. "Tracks, yes, but nothing I ever seen. Come winter, I'll show you." But the tracks were gone by then, washed away by morning rain that seemed to fall only where evidence might have been. That should have been my first warning. At the Patterson place, it was sheep. Sarah Patterson, a young mother with dirt under her nails and fear in her eyes, walked me through her pasture. 12 sheep, she whispered. Just torn apart and left. My husband's talking about moving back to town, but this land's been in his family 4 generations. The attack pattern was the same. Wild destruction, minimal feeding, tracks that disappeared with convenient timing. But there was something else here. A smell like rotten eggs and old meat that hung in the air even though the bodies were long buried. "Mrs. Patterson, you hear anything that night? Howling, maybe?" Her face went white. "Not howling exactly. More like someone crying. A person crying, but wrong somehow. My little girl woke up screaming, said she heard a baby crying in the woods." That evening, I set up camp near the 3rd farm, the Lawson place, where they'd lost a bull and 2 calves just 3 days before. Bull was named Goliath, and he weighed near a ton. Whatever took him down had to be something special. I built a small fire and settled in to wait. The mountains at night are never silent, but as the hours passed, the normal sounds faded away. No owls, no rustling leaves, no small creatures moving through the underbrush. Just silence so thick it pressed against your ears. Around midnight, the crying started. At first I thought it was wind through the trees, but wind doesn't sob. Wind doesn't call out in words you almost understand. The sound came from deep in the woods, moving closer to my camp. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle, following the sound through the trees. The beam cut through the darkness, showing me nothing but tree trunks and shadow. But the crying continued, always just ahead, always leading me deeper. That's when I found the clearing. It was maybe 50 yards across, perfectly round, with no trees or bushes growing inside it. The grass was dead and black, and in 2. His center sat a pile of bones picked clean and white. Cattle bones, sheep bones, and others I didn't want to think about too hard. The crying stopped. I stood at the edge of that cursed clearing, every instinct telling me to run. But I was a ranger, trained to investigate, trained to protect. So I stepped into the circle of dead ground. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. My breath came out in puffs of vapor and frost began forming on the bones at my feet. That's when I heard the voice behind me. "Hungry," it whispered. "So very hungry." I spun around, rifle raised, but saw nothing. Just trees and shadows, and the terrible certainty that something was watching me. Something that had been waiting for me to come to it. "Show yourself," I called out, trying to keep the fear from my voice. Laughter answered me. Not human laughter, but the sound a hyena might make if it could think cruel thoughts. The sound came from everywhere at once, the trees, the ground, the very air around me. Then I saw the eyes. 2 points of yellow light about 8 feet off the ground, hanging in the darkness between the trees. As I watched, they began to move closer. Not walking closer, floating closer, like they were attached to something that didn't need to touch the ground. I raised my rifle and fired 3 shots at those eyes. The muzzle flashes lit up the clearing like lightning, but in the brief illumination, I saw nothing but empty air where the eyes had been. The laughter came again, right behind me this time. I ran. Crashing through the woods, branches tearing at my clothes and face, I ran like a man possessed. Behind me came the sound of something large moving through the trees, keeping pace without effort. Not chasing, following, like a cat playing with a mouse. I made it back to my truck and drove down the mountain with my hands shaking on the wheel. But as I reached the main road, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw those yellow eyes watching me from the tree line. That night in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice whispering "hungry" in my ear. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home. The next morning brought news that made my blood run cold. Bobby Chen, a fellow ranger I'd known for 6 years, was missing. His truck was found parked at the Sorrow Mountain trailhead, driver's door hanging open, keys still in the ignition. "When's the last time anyone saw him?" I asked Sheriff Mills. "Yesterday afternoon. He was checking reports of illegal hunting up near Devil's Backbone Ridge. That's maybe 5 miles from where you were last night." I volunteered to join the search party, though part of me wanted to run the opposite direction. We found Bobby 3 hours later, and I wish to God we hadn't. He was hanging upside down from a tall pine tree, maybe 30 feet off the ground. His body had been torn open from throat to belly, and he was empty inside. Completely empty, like something had scooped out everything that made him human. "Jesus Christ," whispered Deputy Harris, turning away to vomit. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Bobby's face. His eyes were wide open, and his mouth was stretched in a scream that would never end. But carved into his forehead like someone had used a claw to write letters were the words, "First Course." We got Bobby down with ropes and pulleys, wrapped him in blankets, and carried him out of those woods. But the smell stayed with us, that same rotten egg and old meat smell I'd encountered at the farms. And something else. Something that made my mouth water even though I wanted to be sick. That night, I dreamed of Bobby hanging in that tree. But in the dream, I wasn't horrified. I was hungry. I was looking at him like he was a Christmas ham, and saliva was running down my chin. I woke up with the taste of raw meat in my mouth. The attacks got worse after that. Not just livestock anymore, but people. Hikers who ventured too far up Sorrow Mountain. Local hunters who thought they were tough enough to handle whatever was out there. A family of 4 whose car broke down on the mountain. Road. Each scene was the same. Bodies torn apart, partially eaten, and that terrible message carved somewhere nearby. Getting stronger. Almost ready. Soon. But I was changing too, though I didn't understand it at first. My appetite increased. I found myself eating raw hamburger when I thought no one was looking. The smell of blood made me salivate instead of sick, and I was getting stronger, stronger than any human should be. 3 weeks after Bobby's death, I was eating dinner at Murphy's Diner in town when Jenny Walsh walked in. Jenny was maybe 22, fresh out of college, working as a waitress to save money for nursing school. Sweet girl with strawberry blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room. She came over to refill my coffee, and when she bent down, I caught her scent. Not her perfume or shampoo, but her scent. The warm, living smell of her blood flowing just beneath her skin. My mouth filled with saliva so fast I nearly choked. "You okay, Ranger Graveborn?" she asked, concerned. I looked up at her, and for just a moment I saw her as she really was. Not Jenny the sweet waitress, but Jenny the prey. Soft flesh over tender meat, all of it walking around waiting to be harvested. "Fine," I managed to say. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. As she walked away, I watched the movement of her legs, the way her uniform hugged her body, and I was thinking about how she would taste, how her blood would feel running down my throat. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong with me. I left the diner without finishing my meal and drove straight to the clinic. Dr. Morrison had been the town doctor for 30 years, and if anyone could tell me what was happening to me, it would be him. "I need you to run some tests," I told him. "Blood work. Whatever you think is necessary. Something's wrong with me." He looked me over with professional eyes. "You've lost weight. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" I tried to remember. "I eat all the time, but I'm always hungry, always thinking about food." "What kind of food?" I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't say that I dreamed of human flesh, that I looked at people and wondered how they would taste. Just meat. Red meat. The rarer the better. He took blood samples and told me to come back in a week. But I didn't have a week. That night, the hunger hit me like a freight train. I found myself standing in my kitchen at 2 a.m., eating raw ground beef with my bare hands. The blood ran between my fingers, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. When I looked in the mirror afterward, my reflection showed me the truth I'd been trying to deny. My eyes had flecks of yellow in them. My canine teeth were longer, sharper, and when I smiled, it wasn't a human smile anymore. The thing in the woods hadn't just followed me home. It had gotten inside me. The next day brought another attack, this one closer to town than ever before. The Martinez family, husband, wife, and teenage son, found slaughtered in their cabin just 2 miles from the main road. The scene was familiar by now, but worse, much worse. They'd been partially eaten while still alive. You could tell by the way they were arranged, by the look in their eyes. Whatever killed them had wanted them to know what was happening. I was taking photographs of the scene when I caught the scent again, that wonderful, terrible smell of fresh blood and raw meat. My mouth began to water, and I had to step outside before anyone noticed. That's when I saw the footprint in the soft earth by the cabin steps. A bare human foot, but too large, with toenails that were more like claws. The print was fresh, maybe an hour old. It was my footprint. I stared at that footprint for a full minute, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was impossible, but there it was, clear as day in the soft earth. My foot, but wrong, stretched and distorted like it belonged to something that was trying to be human, but didn't quite remember how. Ranger Graveborn. It was Deputy Martinez, no relation to the dead family, just one of those coincidences that make small towns feel cursed. "You find something?" I stepped over the print, blocking it from his view. Nothing useful, just more of the same. But as we worked the crime scene, I kept finding evidence that pointed to me. A thread from my jacket caught on a tree branch 20 feet from the cabin. A partial boot print that matched my hiking boots exactly. And in the dirt near the bodies, scratched out like someone had tried to erase it, were the letters J-E-R. I was losing time. Hours would pass, and I wouldn't remember where I'd been or what I'd done. I'd find dirt under my fingernails that wasn't there before, scratches on my arms that I couldn't explain, and always, that taste of copper and salt in my mouth. The hunger was getting worse, too. I'd eaten a dozen raw steaks in the past week, but nothing satisfied it. Nothing filled the growing emptiness inside me that seemed to consume everything I put into it. 3 days after the Martinez killings, my partner, Sam Rodriguez, came to check on me. Sam was a good man, 15 years on the job, with a wife and 2 kids who thought he hung the moon. We'd worked together for 3 years, and I trusted him more than anyone. "You look like hell, Jerry," he said, standing in my cabin doorway. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep," I lied. Truth was, I barely closed my eyes anymore. When I did sleep, I dreamed of hunting, of chasing terrified people through the woods while they screamed and begged, and in the dreams, I loved every minute of it. The sheriff's worried about you. We all are. Maybe you should take some time off. Go visit your sister in Nashville. My sister. I hadn't thought about Rachel in weeks. Sweet Rachel, who called every Sunday to check on me, who still bees. Believed I was the good man she'd grown up with. What would she think if she could see me now? I can't leave, I told Sam. Not with this thing still out there killing people. Sam stepped closer and I caught his scent. Different from Jenny at the diner, but just as intoxicating. He smelled like coffee and aftershave and something else underneath, something warm and alive and delicious. That's what I'm talking about, Jerry. You're too involved. You need perspective. I was looking at his neck, at the pulse point where his blood flowed closest to the surface. My mouth filled with saliva, and I had to swallow hard to keep from drooling. Maybe you're right, I said, backing away from him. I should get some rest. After Sam left, I barricaded my door and windows. If I was becoming the monster, then I needed to protect people from me. But even as I stacked furniture against the door, part of me was planning how I would get out when the hunger became too strong to resist. That night, I blacked out completely. I came to at dawn, standing in the woods about 2 miles from my cabin. I was naked and covered in blood that wasn't mine. In my hand was a piece of cloth torn from a flannel shirt, the same shirt Sam had been wearing when he visited me. I ran through the woods like a madman, following my own trail backward. It led to a ranger station on the far side of the mountain, one of the remote outposts we used during fire season. The door was torn off its hinges, hanging by one bent nail. Inside, I found what was left of Tom Bradley, the night watchman. Poor old Tom, who was just trying to make a few extra dollars before retirement. He'd been torn apart like the others, but this killing was different. Messier, more personal, and carved into the wall above his body, in letters that looked like my handwriting, was a message. Can't stop myself. I threw up until there was not, hing left, then kept retching until my throat was raw. But even as I was sick with horror at what I'd done, part of me, a growing, hungry part, was disappointed that I hadn't been awake to enjoy it. The transformation was accelerating. By the next evening, I could barely remember being fully human. My body was changing, becoming something designed for hunting and killing. My fingers were longer, ending in claws that could cut through bone. My teeth were sharp as razors, and my eyes reflected light in the dark like an animal's. But the worst part was that I could still think, still feel guilt and horror at what I was becoming. The monster wasn't taking over my mind. It was using my mind, making me complicit in every terrible thing it did. I called Sam's house to check on him, praying he'd answer. "Rodriguez residence," came his familiar voice. Relief flooded through me. "Sam, it's Jerry. Are you okay?" "Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be?" I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't say that I'd woken up covered in blood with a piece of his shirt in my hand. "Just wanted to make sure you got home safe last night. Jerry, I haven't seen you since yesterday afternoon. Are you sure you're all right?" Had I imagined the whole thing? Was the guilt making me paranoid, creating false memories to punish myself? But when I looked at my hands, I could still see traces of blood under my fingernails. "I'm fine, Sam. Just tired." But I wasn't fine, and we both knew it. That night, the hunger took complete control. I don't remember leaving my cabin or hunting through the woods, but I remember the feeding. I remember the taste of fresh blood and the sound of bones cracking between my teeth. I remember the satisfaction of finally, briefly, being full. When I came back to myself, I was crouched over the remains of a hiker who'd been camping illegally on the mountain. A young man, maybe 25, with a backpack full of camera equipment. He'd probably come up here to photograph the fall colors. I'd eaten most of his torso. The sight of what I'd done should have horrified me, but all I felt was a terrible sense of completion. This was what I was now. This was my purpose, and I was still hungry. By the time I made it back to my cabin, I knew there was no going back. The thing I'd become was too strong, too hungry, and too clever to be contained. It was using my knowledge of the mountains, my authority as a ranger, my relationships with the community to hunt more effectively. And it was planning something special. I found myself writing in my journal, though I don't remember deciding to write. The handwriting was mine, but the words felt like they came from somewhere else. The pack is coming together. 3 more days, and the transformation will be complete. Then we hunt the town. Start with the children. They're tender and don't fight back. Save the women for breeding. The men will feed us through the winter. Asterisk, we? There was no we. I was alone in this nightmare. But as I looked out my window at the dark forest, I saw them. Yellow eyes watching from between the trees. Not just one pair, but dozens. The thing that had infected me had infected others too. Other rangers, other people who'd ventured too far into the woods and come back changed. We were a pack now, and hunting season was about to begin. I had to stop it. Had to stop myself before we descended on the town like a plague of hungry ghosts. But how do you fight something that lives inside your own skin? The answer came to me as I was cleaning my rifle. If I couldn't fight the monster, maybe I could feed it something that would destroy us both. I called Sam and asked him to meet me at the old fire tower on Sorrow Mountain. Told him I'd found evidence about the killings, something that would break the case wide open. Sam trusted me, and that trust was going to get him killed. But if I was going to become a monster, at least I could choose my last victim. The fire tower was a relic from the 1940s, a wooden structure that rose 100 feet above the tree line. Sam was already there when I arrived, standing at the base with his flashlight in one hand and his service weapon in the other. "What's this evidence you found?" he asked. I stepped into the circle of his flashlight beam, and I saw him recoil. Even in the dim light, he could see what I'd become. My features had sharpened into something predatory. My eyes reflected his flashlight beam like a wild animal's, and when I smiled, my teeth caught the light like broken glass. "The evidence is me, Sam. I'm the monster." He raised his weapon, but he was too slow, too human. I was on him before he could pull the trigger, my claws raking across his chest and sending him sprawling. "Jerry, what the hell?" "Not Jerry anymore," I said, circling him like the predator I'd become. "Jerry's still in here somewhere, screaming, but he's not driving anymore." Sam rolled behind a tree and fired 3 shots. One caught me in the shoulder, spinning me around, but the wound closed almost instantly. Wendigo flesh regenerated faster than human weapons could damage it. "You can't kill me with bullets, Sam, but I appreciate you trying." I could smell his fear now, sharp and acrid like burning metal. It mixed with his sweat and blood to create a perfume that made my mouth water. Behind me I heard movement in the trees. The pack was coming to watch the show. "There are more of you," Sam whispered. "A dozen so far. All the missing hikers, some of the other rangers. We've been building our strength, waiting for the right time to take the town." He fired again, this time aiming for my head. The bullet grazed my scalp, taking off a piece of ear. I felt it grow back even as the blood ran down my neck. "But you're special, Sam. You get to be my last meal as a human. After I finish with you, the transformation will be complete." I leaped at him again, but this time he was ready. As I came down, he rolled away and swung his heavy flashlight like a club. It caught me in the temple hard enough to crack the chians. Ebone. For a moment, I saw stars. "Still got some fight in you," I laughed, spitting blood. "Good. It tastes better when you struggle." That's when the real Jerry, what was left of him, fought back. Asterisk. "No." Asterisk came a voice from deep inside my mind. Asterisk, not Sam. Anyone but Sam. The hunger roared in response, demanding to be fed, but the human part of me, the part that remembered friendship and loyalty and love, grabbed onto that refusal and held tight. I staggered, clutching my head as 2 natures warred inside my skull. Human Jerry fought for control, while Monster Jerry snarled and clawed at my consciousness. "Fight it!" Sam yelled. "Whatever this thing is, fight it!" I looked at him with eyes that were no longer entirely yellow. Can't fight it much longer. Sam, you have to run. Get to town, warn everyone. Tell them to evacuate. I'm not leaving you like this. I'm already gone, I screamed, falling to my knees as the hunger surged back stronger than ever. It's just wearing my face. But Sam didn't run. Instead, he knelt beside me and put his hand on my shoulder. Then I'll stay here with you. You don't have to face this alone. His kindness broke something inside me. The last bit of humanity I had left rose up in a final desperate act. I grabbed his service weapon and pressed it to my own chest. I'm sorry, Sam, for everything. I pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through my heart, and for a moment I thought it was over. I felt myself falling backward, Sam's shocked face above me, and a sense of relief that maybe I'd finally stopped the monster. But Wendigo don't die easy. The wound began to close almost immediately, my heart restarting with a wet, irregular rhythm. I sat up, coughing blood, and saw the look of horror on Sam's face as he realized what I was. Can't die, I whispered. Not anymore. Have to find another way. That's when I heard them, coming through the trees. The pack I'd helped create, drawn by the scent of blood and violence. Their yellow eyes bobbed through the darkness like fireflies from hell. Sam, I said, grabbing his arm with claws that drew blood even through his jacket. The fire tower. We need to get up high. We climbed that rickety wooden structure in the dark, Sam going first while I followed behind. With each step, I felt the monster growing stronger, the human part of me fading away. By the time we reached the top platform, I could barely speak in human words. Below us, the pack gathered at the base of the tower. I counted 15 of them, former hikers, campers, and 3 other rangers I recognized, all of them transformed into the same nightmare I'd become. They're waiting, Sam said, looking down at the yellow eyes staring up at us. Waiting for me, I corrected. I'm their alpha. When I'm fully transformed, we'll hunt together. Sam looked at me with something that might have been pity. Is there anything left of my friend in there? I met his eyes, and for a moment I was fully human again. Enough to know what has to be done. Sam, there's a can of gasoline up here for the emergency beacon. I need you to pour it all over the platform. Why? Because fire kills everything, even Wendigo. He found the gas can and began soaking the wooden platform while I fought to maintain control of myself. The human Jerry was almost gone now, just a whisper in the back of a monster's mind. Light it, I told him when he was done. Not with you up here, especially with me up here. I could feel my body changing again, growing larger and more bestial. Sam, if I transform completely, I'll kill everyone in town. Every man, woman, and child. You know I will. He pulled out his lighter, but his hand was shaking. There has to be another way. Look at me, I snarled, and when he did, I let him see the monster fully. My face had elongated into something between human and wolf. My teeth were sharp as knives. My eyes burned yellow in the darkness. This is what I am now. That is what they'll all become if you let me go. Below us, the pack began to climb. Their claws scratched against the wood as they pulled themselves up the tower's support beams. Do it now, I roared. Sam flicked his lighter, and the platform erupted in flames. The fire spread faster than either of us expected. Within seconds, we were surrounded by a wall of orange and red that reached toward the night sky like grasping fingers. The heat was incredible, and I felt my Wendigo flesh beginning to sizzle and pop. But as the flames consumed me, something wonderful happened. The pain burned away the monster's influence, and for the first time in weeks, I was fully myself again. Sam, I called out over the roar of the fire. Thank you. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Then he jumped. I watched him fall toward the trees below, hoping he'd survive the drop, hoping he'd get to town in time to warn everyone about what was coming. The platform collapsed beneath me, sending me crashing down through 90 feet of burning wooden beams. I hit the ground in an explosion of sparks and flame, my body broken but still trying to heal itself. The pack surrounded me as I burned, their yellow eyes reflecting the firelight. They could smell their alpha dying, and they were confused, lost without a leader. That's when the real fire started. The tower had been built during a dry autumn, and the surrounding forest was full of dead leaves and dry branches. The flames spread from the collapsed platform into the trees, then beyond into the greater forest. Within an hour, half of Sorrow Mountain was burning. I crawled through the flames, my body healing and burning and healing again in an endless cycle of agony. But with each iteration, the Wendigo curse grew weaker. Fire was the only thing that could truly kill what we'd become, and there was plenty of fire to go around. One by one, I watched the pack members succumb to the flames. They ran through the burning forest, their inhuman cries echoing off the mountains, until the fire consumed them completely. I lasted longer, because I'd been the alpha, but even I couldn't survive indefinitely. As dawn broke over the burning mountain, I felt the last of the Wendigo curse finally release its hold on me. I died as the sun came up, human again at last. My name is Beauregard Jokerman, but everyone calls me Beau. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. With a last name like Jokerman, I was pretty much destined to be funny. And you'd be right. 3 years ago, I was doing stand-up comedy in Atlanta dive bars, bombing harder than the Confederacy. That's when I decided to become a park ranger at Chattahoochee National Forest. I figured if I was going to bomb, might as well do it somewhere with nice trees. The year was 1988, and I was stationed at Moonshine Hollow, a section of the forest that got its name from all the illegal stills hidden in these hills back in Prohibition days. Now it's mostly tourists wanting to see where their great-granddaddies cooked up rot-gut whiskey. My job was visitor relations and park tours, which basically meant I told the same stories about moonshiners and bears about 50 times a day, trying to keep folks entertained. I loved this job, don't get me wrong. The pay wasn't great. But after 3 years of hecklers throwing beer bottles at my head, dealing with tourists asking if they could pet the bears felt like a vacation. Plus, the material was gold. Nothing funnier than city folks trying to rough it in the wilderness. That's why, when old Jake Hensley came stumbling into the ranger station that Tuesday morning, babbling about some laughing monster, I figured it was just another tall tale. Jake was one of the local mountain men, beard down to his belt, breath that could kill a skunk, and a reputation for sampling his own moonshine a little too heavily. "Ranger Beau," he wheezed, leaning against my desk like he'd run a marathon. "You got to do something about that thing up on Devil's Ridge." I looked up from my paperwork and tried not to breathe through my nose. Jake smelled like he'd been marinating in corn liquor for a week. "What thing, Jake?" "The laughing beast." His eyes were wide and blood. "Shot. Heard it last night, clear as day. Sounded like a man laughing, but wrong. Too loud, too long. Made my skin crawl something fierce." I leaned back in my chair, already working up my response. "Jake, you sure it wasn't just Bob Miller testing out his new still? You know how he gets when the moon's full." "This ain't no drunk hillbilly boy." Jake slammed his fist on my desk, making my coffee jump. This was something else. Something big. The way he said big made me pause for just a second. Jake had lived in these mountains his whole life, 73 years of knowing every sound, every shadow, every creature that called this forest home. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. "Jake, how much of your own product did you sample last night?" His face turned red. "I'm stone cold sober, you smart-mouthed city boy. And when that thing comes for you, don't come crying to me." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard, my Smokey the Bear poster fell off the wall. I chuckled and went back to my paperwork. This was going to make great material for my next amateur night at Murphy's Tavern. The rest of the day was pretty normal. Led a group of Boy Scouts on the nature trail, helped a family from Ohio figure out how to work their camp stove, and broke up what could have been an ugly situation between two guys arguing over the last good fishing spot on Moonshine Creek. Just another day in paradise. But as the sun started setting and the shadows got longer, I found myself thinking about Jake's visit. Not because I believed him, hell no, but because in all the time I'd known him, I'd never seen him that shaken up. Usually when Jake spun his yarns, he was grinning and enjoying every word. This time, he'd looked genuinely scared. I was locking up the station around 8 when I heard it. Laughter. Not the normal kind you hear around campfires. This was different, and louder. It echoed through the trees like it was coming from everywhere at once, and it went on, and on, and on. At least 2 solid minutes of non-stop cackling. I stood there in the parking lot, keys in my hand, listening. The sound made my teeth itch. You know that feeling when someone drags their fingernails across a chalkboard? This was like that, but for your ears. When it finally stopped, the silence felt heavier than before. Even the crickets had shut up. I shook my head and climbed into my truck. Probably just some teenagers fooling around with a bullhorn or something. Tomorrow, I'd drive up to Devil's Ridge and find whatever stupid prank they'd set up. Then, I'd have an even better story to tell. As I drove home through the winding mountain roads, I caught myself checking the rearview mirror more than usual. And when that laughter started up again around midnight, so loud it woke me from a dead sleep, I told myself it was just the wind. Even though there wasn't any wind that night, even though it sounded like it was right outside my cabin the next morning, I decided to prove Jake wrong and myself right. I packed my usual day gear, water, first aid kit, radio, and my sense of humor, and headed up to Devil's Ridge. The trail was steep and rocky, winding through thick pine trees that blocked out most of the sun. Perfect place for teenagers to set up some elaborate joke. Halfway up, I found the first weird thing. Footprints. Big ones. Now, I'm no tracking expert, but these prints were huge. Had to be at least 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. Way too big for any human, even someone wearing oversized boots as part of a prank. The prints pressed deep into the soft earth near the creek, like whatever made them weighed a ton. I knelt down and examined them closer. 5 toes, just like a human foot, but with what looked like claw marks at the tips. The stride between prints was enormous, maybe 6 feet. "All right," I said out loud, "somebody's having fun with fake Bigfoot feet." But as I followed the trail of prints, they led to place. That didn't make sense. Up the sides of boulders, across the creek in one impossible leap, 15 feet of rushing water, and at one point the prints just stopped, right in the middle of a clearing. Like whatever made them had just vanished into thin air. I was scratching my head over that when I heard voices coming from further up the trail. Tourists. A family by the sound of it. Mom, Dad, and at least 2 kids. I hurried up the path and found them at the scenic overlook. Nice family from Tennessee. The Johnsons. Dad was trying to get a good photo while Mom was unpacking sandwiches and the 2 little girls were chasing butterflies. "Beautiful day for it," I called out as I approached. "Oh, hello there." The dad turned around, camera in hand. "You must be a ranger. Perfect timing. We were hoping someone could tell us about that sound we heard last night." My stomach dropped a little. What kind of sound? "Laughter," the mom said, not looking up from the sandwiches. "Woke up the whole campground around midnight. Went on forever. Scared the girls something fierce," the dad added. "Never heard anything quite like it." One of the little girls, couldn't have been more than 7, tugged on my uniform sleeve. "Mr. Ranger, what kind of animal laughs like a person?" I knelt down to her level, putting on my best reassuring smile. "Well, sometimes the wind through the trees can make some pretty weird sounds. And there's always the possibility of..." I was about to say pranksters, but something in the little girl's eyes stopped me. She looked genuinely scared. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Probably just some silly teenagers playing jokes." That's when we heard it again. The laughter started low, almost like a chuckle. Then it built and built until it was booming across the entire valley. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. The trees, the rocks, the sky itself. And it just kept going. The little girls grabbed onto their parents, eyes wide with terror. The dad fumbled with his camera, trying to record the sound. The mom was looking around frantically, like she expected something to come bursting out of the woods. But what really got to me was how the laughter made me feel. It wasn't just loud, it was wrong. Like hearing a beautiful song played backwards, or watching someone smile with too many teeth. It made every instinct I had scream, "Run." When it finally stopped, after what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably only 2, the silence was deafening. Even the wind had stopped. "We should go," the mom whispered. "Right now." The dad nodded, stuffing his camera back in his bag. They packed up their picnic in record time, grabbed the girls, and headed back down the trail without another word. I stood there alone at the overlook, staring out at the forest. Somewhere out there, something was laughing, and whatever it wasn't human. That evening, I radioed into headquarters to report what I'd heard. Dispatch told me they'd gotten 3 other calls about strange sounds in the Moonshine Hollow area, all describing the same thing. Unnatural laughter that went on way too long. "Could be a new bird species," the dispatcher suggested. "Or maybe someone's playing recordings through speakers." "Yeah, maybe," I said. But I didn't believe it. Birds don't leave 18-inch footprints. I was getting ready to head home when my radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, this is dispatch. We've got a situation at Moonshine Creek Campground. Need you to respond immediately." "What kind of situation?" "Medical emergency. Camper found unconscious. EMTs are on the way, but they need someone familiar with the area to guide them in." I grabbed my gear and raced over to the campground. Found the EMTs working on a middle-aged man outside his tent. His wife was standing nearby, crying and shaking. "What happened?" I asked one of the paramedics. "Strangest thing I've ever seen," he said, not looking up from his potty. "Yent. Wife says her husband started laughing around 10 o'clock and just couldn't stop. Been going for 3 hours straight. Laughed so hard he passed out from lack of oxygen." I looked at the man's face. Even unconscious, the corners of his mouth were turned up in a slight smile. "Is he going to be okay?" "Don't know. We've sedated him, but..." The paramedic shook his head. "In 30 years, I've never seen anything like this." As they loaded the man into the ambulance, his wife grabbed my arm. "It was that sound," she whispered. "That horrible laughing we heard in the woods. Right after it stopped, Jim started up, like he caught it somehow." The ambulance pulled away, red lights flashing through the trees. I stood there in the darkness, thinking about contagious laughter and 18-inch footprints and sounds that made your skin crawl. For the first time since I'd become a ranger, I wasn't laughing. The next few days were a nightmare dressed up like a comedy routine. Word about the Moonshine Hollow monster spread faster than gossip at a church social. Instead of scaring people away, it brought them running. Cryptid hunters, paranormal investigators, reporters, and just plain curious folks started showing up by the dozen. My quiet little section of forest turned into a 3-ring circus. I spent most of my time trying to manage the chaos. People were camping in areas they weren't supposed to, leaving trails blocked with equipment, and asking me the same questions over and over. "Have you seen it? What does it look like? Is it really Bigfoot?" I stuck to my official line. "We're investigating reports of unusual sounds in the area, probably just natural forest phenomena or human activity." But privately, I was getting more worried every day. The laughter happened every night now, usually around 10 o'clock and again near midnight. And it was getting louder. What started as something you had to strain to hear was now echoing across miles of forest. Campers were complaining about lost sleep. Some were packing up and leaving after just one night. More troubling were the people who weren't leaving. Like the Johnson family's experience, some folks seemed to catch whatever was causing the laughter. They'd start chuckling during or right after the nightly episodes, and then they couldn't stop. Most managed to get control of themselves after a few minutes, but a few ended up in the hospital. The man from the first night, Jim Peterson, was still in intensive care in Atlanta. According to his doctors, he was stable but still had episodes where he'd start laughing uncontrollably. His wife said he wasn't the same. Even when he wasn't laughing, he had this weird smile that never went away. On Thursday morning, I was dealing with a group of college kids who'd set up cameras all over Devil's Ridge when my radio squawked. "Unit 7, we need you at the north parking area, another medical situation." I found the EMTs working on a woman in her 50s. She was conscious but giggling nonstop, soft, breathless giggles that sounded more like hiccups. Her husband was pacing nearby, wringing his hands. "Started about 20 minutes ago," he told me. "We were hiking the morning trail when she just started." Won't stop, can't stop. The woman tried to talk between giggles, but could only manage a few words at a time. Can't help it. So funny. What's funny? I asked. She pointed at the trees, the rocks, the sky. All of it. Everything's hilarious. They loaded her into the ambulance, still giggling. That afternoon, I decided to do what I should have done days earlier. Actually investigate this thing properly. I grabbed a powerful flashlight, my camping gear, and my service pistol, just in case, and headed up to Devil's Ridge to spend the night. I set up camp in a spot that gave me a good view of the valley and settled in to wait. If there was something out there making these sounds, I was going to find it. Around 9:30, I heard movement in the brush. Big movement. Branches breaking, leaves rustling, the sound of something large pushing through the undergrowth. I clicked on my flashlight and swept it across the tree line. Nothing. But the sounds kept circling my camp. Whatever it was huge, and it was curious about me. I could hear it breathing, deep, wheezing breaths that sounded almost human but not quite right. Then, at exactly 10 o'clock, it started, the laughter. But this time, I was close enough to see where it was coming from. About 50 yards away, in a clearing I could just make out through the trees, something massive was moving. The beam of my flashlight wasn't strong enough to reach it clearly, but I could see a dark shape, tall, broad, covered in what looked like matted hair. And it was laughing. The sound was coming directly from that shape, no question about it. But as I watched, frozen in my sleeping bag, the laughter started to change. It became more human, more like actual humor, instead of just noise. And then it spoke. "Knock, knock!" The voice boomed through the forest. Deep, gravelly, but unmistakably speaking English. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Knock, knock!" it said again, louder. My mouth opened before my brain caught up. "Who's there?" The laughter that followed was so loud and so wrong that I clapped my hands over my ears. When it stopped, the voice came again. "Orange." This was insane. I was having a conversation with whatever this thing was. But some part of my brain, the part that had spent years doing comedy routines, automatically responded. "Orange who? Orange, you glad I didn't eat you?" The thing exploded into laughter again. And despite everything, the fear, the wrongness, the absolute impossibility of the situation, I felt my mouth starting to twitch into a smile. That's when I realized, the danger I was in. The laughter was infectious. Literally. Whatever this thing was, it was somehow spreading its condition through sound, through humor, through some kind of psychological contagion. The more you heard it, the more you wanted to laugh along. And once you started, you might not be able to stop. I bit down on my tongue hard enough to draw blood, using the pain to keep myself focused. Then I slowly reached for my radio. "Dispatch," I whispered. "This is Unit 7. I need backup at Devil's Ridge immediately." The response came back full of static. "Unit 7, please repeat. Did you say you need backup?" The thing in the clearing had gone quiet, listening. "That's a Roger, dispatch. I've got a..." What was I supposed to say? "I've got a situation up here." "What kind of situation, Unit 7? I opened my mouth to answer when the thing spoke again. "What do you call a bear with no teeth?" Oh, God. It was telling jokes. "Unit 7, please respond." "A gummy bear!" the creature bellowed, followed by that horrible, infectious laughter. And this time, I couldn't help it. The joke was actually funny. A small chuckle escaped my lips before I could stop it. The laughter in the clearing got even louder, like it was pleased with itself. "Unit 7, what is your status?" I fought against the smile spreading across my face and managed to key the radio one more time. "Send everyone," I whispered. "And tell them to bring earplugs." The last thing I heard before my radio died was the creature starting another joke. "Why don't scientists trust atoms?" And God help me, I wanted to hear the punchline. The backup never came. I found out later that my radio transmission got cut off by some kind of interference. All dispatch heard was static. They figured it was just equipment problems. Happens all the time in the mountains. So I was on my own with a 9-foot-tall creature that told jokes and could make people laugh themselves to death. The thing kept going all night, joke after joke after joke. Some were terrible, the kind of groaners you'd hear from a drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. Others were actually pretty good, a few were hilarious, and that was the problem. Every time I found one of its jokes funny, I could feel myself slipping. The urge to laugh got stronger. My face started to hurt from fighting against the smile that wanted to spread across it. By dawn, my jaw was cramped and my tongue was bloody from biting it. But I'd learned something important. The creature was learning too. Its first jokes were simple, childish things, knock-knock jokes and puns. But as the night went on, they got more sophisticated. It was studying comedy, figuring out what worked. And it was getting better at being funny, which meant it was getting more dangerous. When the sun finally came up, the laughter stopped. I packed my gear and hiked back down the mountain, my mind racing. I had to figure out how to stop this thing before it killed someone. That's when I remembered my old comedy background. In my 3 years of doing stand-up, I'd learned one crucial thing. Timing is everything. Good comedy is about rhythm, pace, and knowing when to deliver a punchline. Bad comedy kills the mood. If this creature fed on laughter, on the joy of humor, then maybe bad comedy could hurt it. Maybe terrible jokes could be a weapon. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I dug out my old joke notebooks from my comedy days, the ones filled with material that had bombed so hard I'd gotten booed off stage. I practiced the worst routines I could remember, the ones that had made audiences groan and walk out. I also called in a favor with my buddy Marcus, who worked at the ranger station in Dahlonega. Told him I needed him to bring some industrial-grade speakers and a generator up to Devil's Ridge that evening. Didn't explain why, just said it was official business. Marcus showed up around 7, hauling the equipment in his truck. He helped me set it up in the clearing where I'd seen the creature the night before. "Bo, what the hell is this about?" he asked as we connected the last cables. "Trust me," said, "and whatever happens, don't laugh. No matter what you hear, don't laugh." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but he nodded. We didn't have to wait long. At exactly 10 o'clock, the creature emerged from the tree line. In the light from our electric lanterns, I got my first clear look at it. It was massive, easily 9 feet tall and covered in thick, matted brown hair. Its face was almost human but stretched wrong, with a mouth that was too wide and eyes that were too bright. And it was grinning, a permanent, horrible grin that showed too many teeth. "Well, well," it said in that deep, gravelly voice. "Look what we have here, an audience." Marcus stumbled backward, his face white with terror, but he didn't laugh. "I've got some great material tonight," the creature continued. "A priest, a rabbi, and a minister walk into a bar." I grabbed the microphone connected to the speakers and turned the volume all the way up. "Actually," I said, my voice booming across the valley, "I'd like to do a few minutes first." The creature paused, tilting its head like a confused dog. "What do you get when you cross a joke with a rhetorical question?" I said into the microphone. Silence. "That's the entire joke," I continued. "See, because you don't answer rhetorical questions and—" "Never mind." The creature's grin flickered slightly. I launched into my worst material. The jokes that had made people throw things at me. The puns so bad they'd made entire comedy clubs groan in pain. The routines that were so unfunny they'd actually sucked the humor out of the room. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" I said. "To get to the other side. But here's the thing. Why do we assume the chicken wanted to get to the other side? Maybe the chicken was just taking a walk. Maybe the chicken was protesting against arbitrary road-based boundaries. Maybe the chicken was making a metaphoric statement about the human condition." The creature's grin was definitely smaller now. It took a step backward. "Stop," it said. "That's not funny." "Oh, I'm just getting started," I said. "What's the deal with airplane food? I mean, what is the deal? Is it the preparation, the altitude, The fact that you're eating it in a metal tube 30,000 feet above the ground while traveling at 500 miles per hour? I mean, when you really think about it. The creature was backing away now, holding its hands over its ears. "Make it stop," it howled. But I was on a roll. I did every terrible routine I could remember. Anti-jokes that went nowhere. Puns so bad they caused physical pain. Comedy so aggressively unfunny that it was like weaponized boredom. The creature stumbled, its grin finally disappearing completely. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, it looked afraid. "Please," it begged. "No more." I switched off the microphone. "Leave," I said quietly. "Go back to wherever you came from, and don't come back." The creature looked at me for a long moment, its face twisted with something like pain. Then it turned and disappeared into the forest. We never heard the laughter again. That was 3 months ago. The official report listed the incident as unusual wildlife behavior, possibly related to territorial disputes or mating calls. The folks who'd been affected by the laughter all recovered, though a few still get the giggles when they hear certain types of jokes. Jim Peterson, the first victim, made a full recovery. His wife says he's actually funnier now than he was before, like he picked up some of the creature's sense of humor. The doctors can't explain it, but they're not complaining. The cryptid hunters and paranormal investigators eventually gave up and moved on to other mysteries. Without any new incidents, Moonshine Hollow went back to being just another quiet section of forest where tourists come to learn about moonshine and see some pretty views. But I know better. I've kept studying comedy, not to restart my career, but as insurance. I've memorized every terrible joke, every unfunny routine, every piece of anti-comedy I can find, just in case. Because sometimes, late at night when I'm doing my rounds, I hear something in the distance. Not laughter, not anymore. But something like giggling, quiet, careful giggling. Like something is out there, trying very hard not to be heard. I think the creature is still around. I think it's learning to be more careful, more subtle, and I think it's trying to develop a sense of humor that can't be defeated by bad comedy, which means I need to stay one step ahead of it. Last week I enrolled in a correspondence course on advanced comedy theory. I'm studying everything from ancient Greek theater to modern performance art. I figure if this thing is evolving, I need to evolve too. The other rangers think I'm crazy. Marcus still won't talk about what happened that night on Devil's Ridge. The official line is that we scared off a confused bear with loud noises. But sometimes I catch the other rangers looking at me funny when I practice my material. They don't know about the creature, but they know something happened. They know I'm different now, and I am different. 3 years ago I came to these mountains to find material for my comedy routine. Instead, I found something that almost killed me with laughter. Now I'm not just a park ranger. I'm a guardian. Guardian against something that most people would never believe exists. Something that feeds on joy and humor and all the things that make life worth living. But here's the thing about comedy. It's all about timing, right? And maybe, just maybe, the timing worked out perfectly. Maybe I was exactly the right person to be in exactly the right place when that thing showed up. Because who else would think to fight a monster with bad jokes? The tourists still come to Moonshine Hollow. They stint. They'll want to hear stories about moonshiners and bears. And I still tell those stories, with all the enthusiasm I can muster. But now, I also keep a notebook full of terrible jokes in my truck, just in case something out there decides it wants the last laugh. After all, in comedy, like in life, it's not the joke that kills you. It's the delivery. My name is Detective Ray Copperfield, and I've been chasing ghosts for 15 years. Not the kind that rattle chains in old houses, but the kind that leave behind empty beds and broken families. Missing kids. It's what I do, and it's what's slowly killing me. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in October 1991. Sheriff Martinez handed me a file thick as a phone book and said, "Ray, you need to see this." Inside, were police reports going back 50 years. All children, all missing, all last seen near a place called Widow's Peak in the Cherokee National Forest. 12 kids, Martinez said, lighting his third cigarette of the morning. 12 kids in 50 years, all between ages 6 and 10. Every single case went cold. I'd seen my share of patterns, but this one made my coffee taste like ash. The dates were scattered: 1941, 1953, 1967, 1975, 1982, 1988. No clear timeline, but always the same location. Always children who wandered off during family camping trips or school outings. What changed? I asked. Why are we looking at this now? Martinez pulled out a Polaroid photo, a small boy with freckles and a gap-toothed grin. Tommy Henderson, age 7, disappeared 3 days ago. His family was camping at Widow's Peak. Rangers found his sneakers by the old hiking trail, but no other trace. The photo hit me harder than it should have. Tommy looked just like my son Michael would have looked if he'd lived past his 6th birthday. Car accident 3 years ago. My wife Sarah blamed me for working late that night instead of picking him up from daycare. She was right. I'm assigning you a guide, Martinez continued. Park Service sent their best. Ranger Maria Santos. She knows those mountains better than anyone. An hour later, I met Maria at the forest entrance. She was smaller than I expected, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back and eyes that missed no thing. Her handshake was firm, professional. I've been tracking this case for years, she said without introduction. Not officially, but I keep records, patterns, things that don't add up. Such as? She pulled out a weathered notebook. The kids aren't just missing. They're found eventually. Always in winter. Always frozen to death in places they shouldn't have been able to reach. Rocky ledges hundreds of feet up the mountain. Cave systems that require climbing gear. Places no 7-year-old could get to alone. We drove up the winding mountain road in her Park Service truck. The October air was crisp, leaves turning brilliant reds and golds. Beautiful country, but something felt wrong. The woods were too quiet. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter. Even the wind seemed muted. Maria, I said as we climbed higher, why did you become a ranger? She was quiet for a long moment. I had a daughter, Emma. She'd be 12 now if she'd lived. Hiking accident when she was 8. Fell from a cliff not far from here. Her knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save other people's children. That's when I knew we were both carrying the same burden. Loss changes you, makes you desperate to fix things that can't be fixed. Maybe that's why we were both drawn to this case. We reached the Widow's Peak trailhead as afternoon shadows started growing long. The parking area was empty except for one car, a beat-up Buick with Georgia plates. Tommy Henderson's family car. His parents are still up here? I asked. They won't leave without him, Maria said. They're camped at the main site, quarter-mile up the trail. They organize search parties every day since he disappeared. The main camping area sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. 3 tents were set up around a cold fire pit. A woman in her 30s sat on a log staring at the tree line. Her husband paced nearby, talking rapidly into a cell phone that probably had no signal. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson? I showed my badge. Detective Copperfield, I'm here to help. Find Tommy. The woman looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Are you going to tell us he just wandered off like all the others said? I'm going to tell you the truth, I said, which is that I don't know what happened yet, but I'm going to find out. Mrs. Henderson stood up slowly. Tommy didn't just wander off. He was playing right here, 10 feet from our tent. I went inside for 2 minutes to get his jacket. When I came out, he was gone. But Detective, I heard children laughing in the woods, other children. We were the only family camping here. Her husband ended his phone call and joined us. The rangers searched everywhere. Dogs couldn't pick up a scent past the tree line. It's like he just vanished. Tell me about the laughter, Maria said gently. Mrs. Henderson wrapped her arms around herself. It was coming from deeper in the forest, happy sounds like kids playing tag or hide and seek. Tommy loved playing with other children. He would have followed those sounds. How many voices? I asked. Several. Maybe 4 or 5. All children. She looked at her husband. Tell them about the cold spot. Mr. Henderson nodded. After Tommy disappeared, we noticed this area by the big oak tree got freezing cold, even in the afternoon sun. Frost on the ground in October. That's not natural. Maria and I exchanged glances. We walked over to the area they indicated. Sure enough, the temperature dropped at least 20 degrees near the old oak. Our breath came out in visible puffs. How long has this been here? Maria asked. Since the night Tommy disappeared, Mr. Henderson said. Every morning we find new frost patterns around the tree. Sometimes they look like... Like what? Mrs. Henderson answered quietly. Like small footprints, children's footprints in the frost. The Henderson family agreed to move their camp to the main parking area while Maria and I set up at the original site. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped fast. Too fast for October in North Carolina. I've been camping in these mountains for 12 years, Maria said as we built our fire. I've never seen weather patterns like this. I was studying the files by firelight when the first sound came. Faint laughter, drifting through the trees from the north. Children's voices, high and sweet and completely out of place in the empty wilderness. Maria's head snapped up. Did you hear that? Yeah. I stood up, hand instinctively moving to my service weapon. How far north is the nearest camping area? 15 miles. No way sound would carry that far. The laughter came again, closer this time. Definitely multiple children, maybe 4 or 5 like Mrs. Henderson had said. They seemed to be moving through the forest, playing some kind of game. We need to investigate, I said. Maria grabbed 2 powerful flashlights from her pack. Stay close. These woods can be dangerous at night. We followed the sound north along the old hiking trail. Our flashlight beams cut through the darkness, illuminating pine trunks and undergrowth. The laughter stayed just ahead of us, always just out of sight around the next bend. This doesn't make sense, Maria whispered. There are no children registered in the park tonight. I checked twice. After 20 minutes of hiking, we reached a small clearing I didn't remember from the day's reconnaissance. In the center sat what looked like old playground equipment, a rusted swing set and a wooden seesaw that had to be decades old. Maria, was this here before? She played her flashlight beam over the equipment. No, this clearing, yes, but not this stuff. Park Service removed all old playground equipment years ago. Safety liability. The swings were moving gently in the still air, creaking back and forth as if children had just been playing and them. The seesaw rocked slowly up and down, but the clearing was empty. Then we heard the first voice clearly. Want to play with us? A little girl's voice, maybe 6 or 7 years old, coming from somewhere near the swings. My flashlight beam swept the area but found nothing. Hello? Maria called out. Where are you? We're here to help. Giggling erupted from all around us. Not malicious, just playful. Happy children enjoying a game of hide and seek. We're always here, said a different voice. A boy this time. We live here. We play here every day. Where are your parents? I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle and non-threatening. More giggling. They went away a long time ago, but we don't mind. We have each other. The temperature in the clearing dropped another 10 degrees. Our flashlight beams started showing our breath as white vapor. Maria moved closer to me. Tommy Henderson? I called out. Is Tommy with you? The giggling stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was worse than the unexplained voices. Tommy's our new friend, the little girl's voice said finally. He likes to play with us. We're teaching him games. Where is he? Maria asked. His parents are worried about him. He's sleeping right now, the boy's voice answered. The game made him tired. Cold makes you sleepy. That's when I saw the first one. Just at the edge of my flashlight beam, a small figure darted between 2 trees. A child, maybe 7 years old, wearing what looked like old-fashioned clothing, a dress or jumper from decades past. Maria, did you see? I saw. Her voice was tight. Ray, we need to call for backup. But when I reached for my radio, it produced only static. Maria's Park Service radio was dead too. The cold, she said. "It's affecting the electronics." The little girl's voice came again, closer now. "Don't call the grown-ups. They always try to make us leave. We don't want to leave. This is our home." Another figure flashed past my peripheral vision. Then another. Children playing in the darkness, always just out of direct sight. "How many of you were there?" I asked. 12, came the answer in unison. Multiple voices speaking the same word at the same time. Always 12. We're a family. 12 missing children over 50 years. 12 voices in the darkness. "Listen to me carefully," I said, using my cop voice. "Tommy Henderson needs to go home to his parents. Can you bring him here?" The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost began forming on our jackets. The swing sets started moving faster, as if invisible children were pumping their legs harder. "Tommy likes it here," the boy's voice said, and now it sounded sad. "Everyone always wants to leave, but we get lonely when we're by ourselves." "We don't understand," the little girl added. "Why do our new friends always fall asleep? Why do they get so cold?" Maria grabbed my arm. "Ray, they don't know." "Don't know what?" "They don't know they're dead." We made it back to our campsite as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees. Neither of us had slept. The frost around the old oak tree had spread during the night, creating intricate patterns that looked disturbingly like children's handprints. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told Maria, as she made coffee over our camp stove, "about them not knowing they're dead. It explains everything. The impossible locations where bodies are found, the fact that they can move freely through the forest at night, the cold." She handed me a steaming mug. Ghost stories always talk about cold spots. But those voices sounded so real, so alive. Maybe that's why they're dangerous. They still think they're children who want to play. They don't understand that their touch kills. I pulled out the case files and spread them on our camp table. 12 children, all found frozen to death in locations no living child could reach, all discovered in winter, sometimes months after they disappeared. "Auntie, look at the dates," Maria said, pointing to the first case file. 1941. A 6-year-old boy named Samuel Wright found on a cliff ledge 300 feet up Widow's Peak. No way to climb. Up there without ropes. I flipped to the next file. 1953. Mary Catherine Bell, age 7. Found frozen in a cave system that requires professional spelunking equipment to access. We went through all 12 cases. The pattern was always the same. Children who disappeared during mild weather, found dead in impossible locations during winter freezes. The autopsy reports all showed the same thing, hypothermia, but no signs of struggle or trauma. "They played with them until they died," Maria said quietly. "Just like they're playing with Tommy right now." A noise from the forest made us both look up. Children's laughter again, but closer than last night, coming from the direction of the Hendersons' abandoned campsite. We grabbed our equipment and headed toward the sound. The laughter led us to the same clearing with the phantom playground, but now we could see them clearly in the morning light. 12 children playing on equipment that shouldn't exist. They looked solid, real, but their clothes were from different time periods. A boy in knickers and suspenders from the 1940s, a girl in a 1960s jumper, another boy in 1980s jeans and sneakers, and sitting on one of the swings was Tommy Henderson. He looked pale and tired, but alive. The ghostly children were taking turns pushing his swing, laughing and chattering like any group of kids at a playground. "Tommy," I called out. The boy looked over and waved weakly. "Hi, mister. Look at all my new friends. They know the best games." I started toward the playground, but Maria grabbed my arm. "Look at the ground around them." The earth in a perfect circle around the playground was covered in thick frost despite the warming morning sun. The ghostly children's breath came out in white puffs. Tommy's lips were turning blue. "Tommy, you need to come with us right now," I said. "Your mom and dad are looking for you." "I want to keep playing," Tommy said, but his voice was weak. "We're playing freeze tag. I'm really good at it." The ghostly children giggled. "Tommy's the best at freeze tag," said the little girl from the previous night. "He stays frozen longer than anyone." "That's because you're killing him," Maria said loudly. The laughter stopped. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward us with expressions of hurt confusion. "We're not hurting Tommy," the boy in knickers said. "We're playing. Playing is fun." "Look at him," I said. "Really look at him. Does he look like he's having fun?" The ghost children turned to stare at Tommy. He was shivering violently now, his lips dark blue. Frost was forming on his hair and eyebrows. "Tommy?" the little girl said uncertainly. "Are you okay?" Tommy tried to answer but couldn't stop his teeth from chattering. He was going into hypothermic shock. "We have to get him out of there," I told Maria. "If you enter that frost circle, you'll freeze too," she warned. But I was already moving. I'd failed to save my own son. I wasn't going to fail Tommy Henderson. The cold hit me like a physical blow as I crossed into the frost circle. My breath turned to ice in my lungs. Every step felt like walking through freezing water. The ghost children backed away from me, looking frightened. "Please don't take Tommy away," the little girl pleaded. "We don't have anyone else to play with." "I'm sorry," I said, reaching for Tommy, "but Tommy needs to go home." The moment I touched the boy, the cold became unbearable. Ice crystals formed on my jacket. My fingers went numb instantly. But Tommy was alive, and I could carry him. I stumbled back toward Maria, fighting against the supernatural cold that tried to freeze me in place. The ghost children followed, calling out sadly. "Don't leave us alone again," the boy in knickers begged. "It gets so lonely when there's no one to play with." "Xiaoyu." "We're sorry if we hurt Tommy," the little girl added. "We didn't mean to. We just wanted to play." Maria helped me carry Tommy out of the frost circle. The moment we crossed the boundary, the cold released its grip. Tommy's color started returning immediately. But the ghost children were crying now, 12 voices sobbing in unison. The sound was heartbreaking. Just lonely kids who didn't understand why their friends always went away. "There has to be another way," Maria said, looking at their tear-streaked faces. "They're not evil. They're just children." "Children who kill anyone who tries to play with them," I replied. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of their tragedy. 12 kids, murdered or abandoned, still playing games in the woods where they died. Tommy stirred in my arms. "The cold children," he whispered. "They said they've been waiting so long for someone to play with them. They said they can't leave until they find someone who won't go away." That's when I understood. These weren't malevolent spirits. They were lost children, trapped by their own innocence and loneliness, accidentally killing anyone who showed them kindness. And somewhere in these mountains was the place where they died, the place where someone had hurt 12 children so badly that their spirits couldn't rest. We had to find it, because until we did, they'd keep playing their deadly games forever. We got Tommy to the hospital in Cherokee, where doctors treated him for severe hypothermia. He'd survive, but barely. While the medical team worked, I made calls to every law enforcement agency in the region, looking for records of missing children from the 1800s. Maria was doing her own research at the Cherokee Nation Cultural Center. She found what we were looking for in a collection of oral histories recorded in the 1970s. "Listen to this," she said when we met back at the hospital. "Interview with Joseph Crowfeather, age 91. He's talking about his grandfather's stories." She read from a typed transcript. "Grandfather said there was a bad place up Ross and Widow's Peak. White settlers came in 1847, called themselves the Children of Divine Light. They built a cabin way up on the north face of the mountain, kept to themselves mostly, but sometimes Cherokee hunters would hear screaming from up there. Children screaming. A cult, I said. Gets worse. In 1849, Cherokee hunting party found the cabin empty except for 12 small graves behind it. All children, ages 6 to 10. The white settlers were gone, but the graves were fresh. They sacrificed the children and then fled." Maria nodded grimly. "Joseph's grandfather said the Cherokee marked the place as cursed, said the children's spirits were trapped there, unable to move on because they died so far from their families." "Where exactly was this cabin?" "North face of Widow's Peak. There's an old mining trail that leads up there, but it hasn't been used in decades. Dangerous climb, lots of loose rock." We gathered our equipment and headed back to the forest. The mining trail was barely visible, overgrown with decades of vegetation. It took us 3 hours of hard climbing to reach the north face of Widow's Peak. The cabin ruins sat in a small clearing, nothing left but a stone foundation and rotting timber. But behind it, just as the oral history described, were 12 small graves marked with rough stone cairns. And the temperature around those graves was at least 30 degrees colder than the surrounding forest. "This is where it started," Maria said. 1849. They've been trapped here for almost 150 years. As if summoned by our arrival, the ghost children appeared among the graves. In daylight, on their burial ground, they looked different, older somehow, more aware. "You found our home," the little girl said. She was clearer now, more solid-looking than before. "We've been trying to go home for so long," the boy in knickers added. "But every time we try to leave, we get pulled back here." "Because this isn't your real home," Maria said gently. "This is where you died. Your real homes were somewhere else, with your real families." The ghost children looked confused. "But we don't remember our real families," the little girl said. "We only remember being here, being scared, being cold." "What do you remember about the people who brought you here?" I asked. Their faces changed, becoming frightened. "The mean grown-ups," whispered a small boy I hadn't noticed before. "They said we were special, that we were going to help them talk to God." "They hurt us," added a girl in a Victorian dress. "They said it was for a good reason, but it hurt so much." "And after they hurt you, you stayed here," Maria said. "But you kept playing games to forget about the bad things." "The games helped," the boy in knickers said. "When we played, we didn't feel scared anymore. But no one ever wanted to play with us for very long." "That's because your games are too cold," I explained. "When you play with living children, you make them too cold and they die." The ghost children looked horrified. "We kill them?" the little girl asked. "We don't want to kill anyone," said another boy. "We just want friends." "I know," Maria said. "But you can't stay here anymore. You're hurting people, and you're hurting yourselves. You need to go where your real families are waiting for you." "But how?" the little girl asked. "We've tried to leave so many times, but something always pulls us back." I looked at the rough stone cairns marking their graves. "It's because you're buried here in unmarked graves, far from home. Your spirits are tied to this place." "What can we do?" asked the boy in knickers. Maria and I exchanged glances. We both knew what had to be done, but it felt wrong to ask children, even dead children, to make such a choice. "You have to choose to let go," Maria said finally. "You have to stop playing games and stop trying to find new friends here. You have to trust that your real families are waiting for you somewhere else." "But if we can't find them?" the little girl asked, tears streaming down her translucent cheeks. "Then at least you won't be hurting any more children," I said. "And you won't be trapped in a place where bad things happen to you." The ghost children gathered in a circle, whispering among themselves in voices too low for us to hear. Finally, the little girl who seemed to be their leader stepped forward. "If we go away, will you tell people about us? Will you tell them that we didn't mean to hurt anyone?" "I promise," I said. "And will you make sure no more children get lost looking for us?" "Yes," Maria added. "We'll make sure this area is marked as dangerous. No more camping near Widow's Peak." The little girl nodded. "Okay, we're ready." The 12 ghost children joined hands around their burial ground. They began to glow with a soft, warm light that pushed back the supernatural cold. One by one, they started to fade. "Tell Tommy we're sorry," the boy in knickers called out as he became transparent. "Tell all the parents we're sorry," added the little girl as she too began to disappear. The last thing we heard was their laughter, but different this time. Not the lonely, desperate sound we'd been hearing. Happy laughter. Free laughter. And then they were gone. The cold lifted immediately. Birds began singing in the trees around us. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over Widow's Peak for 150 years was finally broken. 6 months later, I submitted my final report on the Widow's Peak disappearances. Officially, it concluded that Tommy Henderson had gotten lost during a camping trip and suffered exposure-related hallucinations before being found by search and rescue teams. Unofficially, Maria and I knew the truth. The Cherokee Nation agreed to have the burial site blessed by their elders and marked as a sacred place. The Park Service closed the north face of Widow's Peak to camping permanently. Tommy Henderson recovered fully, but he never forgot his encounter with the ghost children. His parents brought him to see me once, a few months after the incident. "He keeps asking about the cold children," Mrs. Henderson said. "He wants to know if they found their families." I knelt down to Tommy's level. "What do you think? Do you think they found their families?" Tommy thought for a moment. "Yeah, I think they did. I dreamed about them once. They were playing in a big sunny field with lots of other kids. They looked happy." "I think you're right," I said. Maria left the Park Service 6 months later. She said she couldn't stay in a job that reminded her every day of children she couldn't save. Last I heard, she was working with a missing children's organization in Atlanta. As for me, I still work missing persons cases, but I approach them differently now. I learned at Widow's Peak that sometimes the dead need help as much as the living, and sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who don't know they're monsters. The Henderson family still sends me Christmas cards every year. Tommy's doing well, playing Little League, doing good in school, normal 7-year-old stuff. But every card includes a drawing he made, and they're always the same. 12 children playing happily in a sunny meadow, no longer cold, no longer alone. I keep those drawings in my desk drawer. They remind me that sometimes, if you're willing to listen, even the dead can find peace. But I still check the missing persons reports every morning. And every time I see a case involving a child lost in the woods, I remember the whisper children of Widow's Peak and wonder what other lonely spirits might be playing deadly games in the darkness, waiting for someone to help them find their way home. The mountains keep their secrets. But sometimes, if you're brave enough to look, you can find the truth buried in those secrets. And sometimes that truth can set everyone free, both the living and the dead. My name is Ezekiel Voidwalker, and I need to tell you what happened at Shadow Mountain before I lose what's left of my mind. 25 years I've worked these Virginia mountains. Started as a regular park ranger when I was 33, fresh out of NASA after what they called my breakdown. Truth is, I saw something in space through the Hubble prototypes that made me quit science forever. Or so I thought. By 1977, I'd worked my way up to park superintendent of the Blue Ridge Parkway section that included Shadow Mountain. Strange name for a peak that barely reaches 3,000 feet, but the Cherokee had their reasons. They called it Where the Sky Bleeds, and wouldn't hunt there, even when game was scarce. The mountain got its modern name from how it cast shadows at impossible angles, even at noon. Visitors complained about their compasses spinning wildly near the summit. We blamed mineral deposits. The real problem started when the university built their radio telescope on the north face. Dr. Sarah Chen, the project director, was excited about the location. Perfect radio silence, she told me during the construction meetings. No interference from civilization. She was wrong about the silence. I was in my cabin that October morning when my radio crackled to life. Sarah's voice came through, tight with excitement. "Ezekiel, you need to get up here. We're getting something incredible." The observatory sat like a metal mushroom against the mountain's bare rock. I'd driven up the access road hundreds of times, but that morning felt different. The trees along the path were too quiet, and my truck's engine coughed in ways it never had before. Sarah met me at the entrance, her dark hair pulled back, lab coat wrinkled like she'd slept in it. Her team of 3 graduate students clustered around banks of equipment that hummed and blinked in the semi-darkness. "We picked up a signal last night," she said, leading me to the main console. "Look at this." The screen showed a pattern that hurt to look at directly. Not because it was bright, but because it seemed to exist in more dimensions than my brain could process. The sound coming through the speakers wasn't quite static. It had rhythm, purpose. "Where's it coming from?" I asked. "That's the thing." She pointed to another screen showing a star map. The source coordinates point to empty space. No stars, no galaxies, nothing, just void. Tommy Breslin, her youngest student, looked up from his instruments. "It's getting stronger. Started at barely detectable 12 hours ago. Now it's..." He checked his readings. "Jesus, it's 10 times stronger than when we called you." I'd heard enough radio chatter in my ranger years to know when something was wrong. This wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. The hair on my arm stood up, and my mouth tasted like copper pennies. "Maybe you should shut it down," I suggested. Sarah laughed. "Are you crazy? This could be first contact. We're recording everything." But Lisa Park, the older graduate student, was studying her computer screen with a frown. "Dr. Chen, the frequency analysis is showing something weird. The signal isn't just getting stronger, it's getting more complex, like it's learning." I felt cold, despite the warm October air. In my NASA days, I'd studied radio signals from deep space. They followed patterns, natural laws. This thing on their screen moved like it was alive. "How long has your equipment been running?" I asked. "We went online 48 hours ago," Sarah said. "But we only started receiving this signal yesterday night." Exactly yesterday night. "Well, the computer logs show first detection at 11:47 p.m., but..." She stopped, seeing my expression. "What's wrong?" I was remembering Cherokee stories my grandfather had told me, back when I was young enough to think they were just legends. Stories about times when the sky opened and things came through that shouldn't exist in our world. "Nothing," I lied. "Just thinking." But I wasn't thinking. I was remembering the thing I'd seen through NASA's deep space cameras, the thing that made me quit a career I'd worked 15 years to build, the thing that lived in the spaces between stars and only showed itself to people who looked too long into the dark. The radio telescope kept humming, pulling in signals from nowhere, and I had the sick feeling that somewhere in that nowhere, something was listening back. Outside, the mountain's shadow fell wrong again, pointing toward the afternoon sun instead of away from it. The signal changed overnight. Sarah called me at dawn, her voice shaking. "Ezekiel, get up here now. Tommy's gone." I threw on my ranger uniform and drove up the mountain faster than the narrow road should allow. My radio kept picking up interference, not static, but voices speaking in languages that didn't sound human. The observatory door stood open. Inside, I found Sarah and Lisa huddled by the main console. The screens showed patterns that moved like living things, twisting in ways that made my vision blur. "Where's Tommy?" I demanded. "We don't know." Lisa's face was pale, her hands shaking. "He was on night watch. We found his notes, but..." She handed me a notebook. Tommy's handwriting started normal. Asterisk signal strength increasing. Frequency modulation suggests intelligence. Attempting to decode. Then it got weird. "It's beautiful. The math is perfect. Why didn't we see it before?" The last entry was in handwriting I didn't recognize. Asterisk. "The spaces between numbers are infinite. Come see." "This isn't Tommy's writing," I said. "I know," Sarah whispered. "But he was alone in here. The doors were locked from inside." I walked to Tommy's station. His coffee mug still steamed, half full. His chair was pulled back like he'd stood up suddenly. But what made my blood run cold was the window behind his desk. From inside the observatory, it should have shown the valley below. Instead, it showed stars. Not our stars, different ones, arranged in patterns that hurt to think about. "You see it too," Lisa said quietly. "The window. It started changing about 2 hours ago." Sarah was back at the main console, adjusting dials with shaking hands. "The signal's getting stronger. It's not just communication anymore, it's doing something. Look." The computer screen showed numbers that kept shifting. Coordinates, equations, measurements that changed as I watched them. But underneath the numbers, something else was forming. A shape. A face. Tommy's face. He's in the signal, I breathed. The face on the screen opened its mouth and spoke in Tommy's voice, but the words came from the radio speakers around the room. It's wonderful here, Dr. Chen. The math finally makes sense. The universe is so much bigger than we thought. Sarah reached for the microphone. Tommy, where are you? How do we get you back? Back? The voice laughed with sounds that weren't quite laughter. Why would I come back? I can see everything from here. Every star, every thought, every possibility. Did you know that there are colors between red and blue that humans can't see? I can see them now. The observatory started shaking. Not an earthquake, something else. The equipment hummed louder, and the lights flickered in patterns that matched the signal on the screens. Lisa grabbed my arm. The mountain! Look outside! Through the one normal window, I saw Shadow Mountain changing. The rock face rippled like water. Trees grew backwards into the ground, then shot up again as different trees. The sky flickered between day and night. We need to shut this down, I said. No! Sarah blocked my path to the emergency power switch. Don't you understand? This is the discovery of the century. We're making contact with something from beyond our reality. That's exactly why we need to stop it. But it was too late. The thing in the signal wasn't just communicating anymore. It was arriving. The air in the observatory grew thick, like trying to breathe underwater. My vision kept sliding sideways, showing me rooms that weren't there, hallways that stretched into infinity. Tommy's voice came through the speakers again, but now other voices joined him. Men and women I didn't recognize, all speaking in perfect harmony. Don't be afraid. The barrier is almost open. Soon you'll understand what exists between the spaces where nothing should be. The screens around the room exploded in showers of sparks, but the signal kept coming. It didn't need the equipment anymore. It was using the mountain itself as an antenna. Lisa screamed. She was staring at her hands, but they weren't her hands anymore. They were reaching into dimensions I couldn't see, stretching in directions that didn't exist. Sarah was laughing and crying at the same time. It's beautiful, she sobbed. Can't you see how beautiful it is? I could see. That was the problem. I could see the thing that lived in the spaces between reality, the thing that fed on human understanding until it drove people mad with impossible knowledge. The same thing I'd run from 15 years ago when I left NASA, only now it had found me again. The reality breaks started small. Lisa vanished while I was trying to call for backup on my radio. One moment she was there, pressing her face against the window that still showed alien stars. The next moment, the space where she'd been standing rippled like heat waves, and she was gone. Sarah didn't even notice. She was too busy talking to the thing in the signal. Yes, I understand, she said to the empty air. The mountain is the anchor point. Earth is the target. Humanity is the infection that needs cleaning. Sarah, we have to go. I grabbed her shoulder, but my hand passed through her like she was made of fog. She was still there, but not completely. Part of her was somewhere else. The computers had all died, but the signal kept broadcasting from the walls themselves. Tommy's voice mixed with dozens of others now, all speaking the same message. The spaces between atoms are infinite. We live in the gaps. Come join us in forever. I tried the door. Locked, but not with any lock I could see. The metal had grown into the frame, fused at the molecular level. The emergency exit was the same, sealed by impossible physics. Outside, Shadow Mountain was reshaping itself. The rock face flowed like clay, forming angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Trees grew in spirals that twisted through themselves. The sky showed 3 different times of day simultaneously. My radio finally crackled to life, picking up a Park Service frequency. But instead of dispatch, I heard my own voice saying, Day 4 of the incident. 2 more researchers have been lost to the dimensional breach. I don't think we can contain this much longer. Day 4. We'd only been here since morning, but when I checked my watch, the hands spun in circles. Time works differently near anchor points, Sarah explained, though she was looking at something I couldn't see. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously. That's why the Cherokee avoided this place. They could sense the temporal instability. I backed away from her. Sarah's face was changing, aging, and becoming young in rapid cycles. Her eyes showed depths that went on forever. "The entity isn't evil," she continued in a voice that wasn't quite hers anymore. "It simply exists in more dimensions than our brains can process. When it touches our reality, we go insane trying to understand it, like ants trying to comprehend calculus. How do I stop it?" Sarah laughed with sounds that came from every direction at once. "Stop it? Ezekiel, you invited it here. Your radio telescope was built exactly where the Cherokee said the sky bleeds. You created a doorway, and then acted surprised when something walked through." The floor beneath my feet started becoming transparent. I could see through the observatory, through the mountain, down to the Earth's core where something vast and tentacled was wrapped around the planet's molten center. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "No God will help you here," said Tommy's voice from everywhere and nowhere. "This is beyond human mythology. This is the reality that exists when human dreams end." The walls started breathing, in and out, like the observatory was alive. With each breath, reality stretched further from normal. I saw colors that didn't have names, heard mathematics singing in harmonies that made my teeth ache. My radio crackled again. This time it was my supervisor's voice from park headquarters. "Superintendent Voidwalker, we're getting reports of anomalies across the entire Blue Ridge Parkway. Hikers are calling in about trees that grow upside down, waterfalls that flow uphill, mountains that change shape. What's your status?" I grabbed the radio, but when I tried to speak, someone else's voice came out. "Everything is fine. The universe is exactly as it should be. Tell everyone to come see the beautiful mathematics." I threw the radio away from me, but it kept broadcasting in that not my voice. "Shadow Mountain is safe. Bring your families. Bring your children. Everyone should witness the glory of infinite space." The thing was using me now, speaking through me. I could feel it in my mind, vast and patient and completely alien. It didn't want to hurt humanity. It wanted to show us truths that would destroy us with their beauty. "The barrier's almost gone," Sarah said. And now she was speaking with my voice too. "A few more hours and the dimensional wall will collapse completely. Then the shadow between stars can step fully into your reality." Through the impossible window, I saw the entity itself for the first time. Not its true form. That would have killed me instantly. But a shadow of it. A reflection that my human brain could barely process. It was beautiful. Sarah was right about that. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And that beauty was going to end the world. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I'd seen this entity before. 15 years ago at NASA, working the night shift on deep space monitoring. A routine scan of empty space had picked up an anomaly, a region where starlight bent wrong, where radio waves disappeared into nothing. I'd pushed for a closer look, adjusted our most sensitive equipment to peer deeper into that impossible darkness. And something had looked back. The thing I'd glimpsed through our instruments had driven me from astronomy forever. I'd convinced myself it was a hallucination, stress-induced madness from too many sleepless nights staring into the void. But now, I understood. The shadow between stars had been watching Earth for decades, waiting for the right conditions. The radio telescope on Shadow Mountain wasn't a coincidence. It was bait. The entity had guided us to build it exactly where the Cherokee said reality was thin. "You remember now," Sarah said, but her voice came from every surface in the room. "You were the first human to see us clearly. We've been calling to you ever since." The observatory walls had become completely transparent. Around us, Shadow Mountain existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I could see its past, Cherokee hunting grounds, Civil War battles, early settlers. I could see its future, a twisted spire of impossible geometry reaching between worlds. And I could see the entity's true plan. "You're not trying to invade," I realized. "You're trying to merge realities." "Invasion implies conflict," Tommy's voice explained from inside my own head. We simply want to bring your three-dimensional existence into harmony with the infinite cosmos. Humanity will become something greater by driving everyone insane, by freeing them from the prison of limited perception. Through the floor, now transparent as glass, I watched the entity's tentacles spreading through the Earth's crust. Not physical tentacles, dimensional ones, reaching into every corner of reality. When they finished their work, the boundaries between dimensions would collapse. Humanity would see the universe as it truly was, and go completely mad from the revelation. I had maybe minutes before the process became irreversible. The radio telescope was still the focal point, the anchor that let the entity touch our reality. If I could destroy it. But the emergency shutdown was protected by physics that shouldn't exist. The equipment had fused with the mountain itself. I'd need an explosion powerful enough to shatter rock. Then I remembered what I'd brought in my truck. Every park superintendent carried emergency supplies, flares, first aid equipment, and a small cache of dynamite for trail maintenance and emergency avalanche control. Enough explosive to collapse the access road if we ever needed to evacuate quickly. The problem was getting to my truck. The observatory door remained sealed by impossible means, and the walls showed views of alien dimensions instead of the Virginia mountains. "Don't fight this, Ezekiel," Sarah pleaded, and for a moment she looked almost human again. "I can see so clearly now, the mathematics of creation, the poetry written in quantum foam. Why would you want to stay trapped in ignorance when infinite knowledge is being offered? Because infinite knowledge would kill us. Because some truths were too big for human minds to survive. Because the Cherokee had been right to avoid this place." I closed my eyes and focused on my memory of the observatory's layout. Real layout, not the dimensional maze it had become. 3 steps to the emergency window. Break the glass. Drop 8 feet to the rocky ledge. Sprint to the parking area. Don't look at the impossible sky. Don't listen to the voices of people who no longer existed in normal space-time. Don't try to understand what was happening to reality around. "Dimmy, just move." I opened my eyes and ran. The emergency window exploded outward when I hit it, but instead of falling 8 feet, I tumbled through empty space filled with stars that sang in frequencies that made my bones vibrate. I fell upward, downward, and sideways simultaneously before hitting solid ground that existed in 3 different centuries at once. My truck sat where I'd parked it, but it was also a Cherokee canoe and a Union Army supply wagon and a tourist's RV, all occupying the same space. I grabbed the dynamite from all 4 vehicles simultaneously and ran back toward the observatory. The radio telescope dish had grown to 10 times its original size, reaching into dimensions that folded back on themselves. But its base was still anchored in normal rock, still vulnerable to conventional explosives. "You can't stop the convergence." The entity spoke through every voice I'd ever known, my parents, my wife, my NASA colleagues. "Reality is already changing. In moments, the barrier will collapse completely." They were right. Through my peripheral vision, I could see the effect spreading beyond the mountain. Trees in the valley were becoming mathematical equations. The Blue Ridge Parkway was turning into a ribbon of light that existed in 11 dimensions. Cars filled with tourists were transforming into geometric concepts. But maybe I could still buy humanity time. Maybe I could collapse this anchor point and force the entity to find another way into our reality. A way that would take years or decades instead of minutes. I set the charges around the telescope's base, my hands working from 25 years of mountain experience, while my mind tried not to process what was happening to the world around me. The fuse would give me 30 seconds to reach minimum safe distance. In normal reality, that would be easy. But reality had stopped being normal. I lit the fuse and ran through a landscape that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously, while the shadow between stars screamed its frustration in frequencies that shattered windows across 3 states. The explosion tore through 11 dimensions at once. When the light faded and my hearing returned, I was lying in normal grass under a normal October sky. The radio telescope was gone, along with most of Shadow Mountain's north face. The observatory had collapsed into a crater that was perfectly circular and impossibly deep. Sarah, Tommy, and Lisa were gone. Not dead. Gone, erased from reality, like they'd never existed. Only I remembered them, and sometimes I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. But the scars remained. Shadow Mountain still cast wrong shadows. Compasses still spun wildly near the peak. And sometimes, on clear nights when I looked up at the stars, I could see gaps in the constellations where something vast was watching Earth with infinite patience. The entity wasn't destroyed, it was just pushed back, forced to wait for another opportunity. The Cherokee stories made more sense now. This wasn't the first time something had tried to break through at this location. Probably wouldn't be the last. I filed my report as a gas explosion, faulty equipment, tragic accident, 3 researchers killed. The university rebuilt elsewhere. The crater became a restricted area, officially due to unstable geology. That was 47 years ago. I'm 95 now, the oldest living park ranger in Virginia history. I've never married, never had children. Couldn't risk passing on knowledge of what exists between the spaces where nothing should be. But I'm dying, and the secret is becoming too heavy to carry alone. Last week I got a call from NASA. They're planning a new deep space monitoring station using quantum entanglement to peer deeper into space than ever before. They want to build it on a mountain in Colorado, where the local tribes warn against disturbing the Earth. I've seen this pattern before. The shadow between stars is patient. It's been waiting for humanity to develop better tools, better ways to look into the depths of space where it lives. Quantum telescopes, artificial intelligence, technologies we haven't even invented yet. All potential doorways. I've written down everything I remember about the entities that live in the spaces between atoms, between thoughts, between moments of time. I've hidden copies in 7 different locations across the country. If something happens to me, maybe someone will find the truth and understand the danger. Or maybe they'll think I was just another crazy old man telling ghost stories about Cherokee legends and government cover-ups. That's probably safer for everyone. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind blows wrong through the trees, I hear voices calling from the direction of Shadow Mountain. Tommy's voice, Sarah's voice, Lisa's voice, all speaking in harmony. The barrier grows thinner every year. Soon we won't need human technology to bridge the gap. Soon we'll step through on our own. And sometimes I look up at the night sky and see the stars rearranging themselves into patterns that spell out messages in languages that don't exist in our dimension. Thank you for showing us the way. We'll be home soon. I wake up every morning hoping I imagined those voices, those messages. But the shadows still fall wrong on Shadow Mountain. And somewhere in the spaces between the stars, something infinite and patient and completely alien is still learning how to open doors into our reality. The Cherokee were right to avoid that place. We should have listened.